Hello, and welcome to the Snoozy Scientist. I'm really glad you made it here tonight. Wherever you are on this planet, this little pocket of quiet was made just for you. A calm space where science and stillness can sit side by side. Tonight, we are drifting into the early oceans, where the first sharks moved through quiet waters that no longer exist. In those ancient seas more than 400 million years ago, sunlight descended through warm shallows and rested on reefs built by life forms long erased. These were worlds older than forests and older than most creatures we recognize today, shaped by forces that governed the earliest history of the oceans. Fossils reveal early sharks gliding between shifting sandbars and dense marine thickets, their bodies spare yet already suited for a planet in constant motion. They inhabited waters that rose and fell with slow planetary rhythms, seas that changed shape as continents drifted and climates shifted across deep time. As the ages unfolded, entire coastlines drowned and reformed. Oceans warmed, cooled, dimmed, and brightened under skies altered by distant cataclysms. Through these transformations, only faint traces of early sharks remain, scattered teeth, fragments of fin spines, and delicate denticles pressed into ancient stone. Each fragment suggests continuity through upheaval. They appear in layers where countless other lineages end, hinting at a survival that remains only partly understood. Yet the fossils reveal little beyond their persistence. The reasons for their endurance lie hidden within the strata, a mystery written in silence rather than detail. But what allowed these early sharks to continue on when entire ocean worlds rose and vanished around them? What traits helped these ancient hunters survive changes that erased so many others? How did their simple forms carry them through eras shaped by fire, ice, and silence? And what deeper resilience kept their lineage moving forward when the planet shifted beneath their fins? Tonight, we follow the soft trail they left behind, letting the ancient waters show us how their story began. But before we begin, if you're already enjoying this peaceful moment, it would mean the world to me if you gave this video a gentle like, maybe even subscribed if you'd like more sleepy science stories like this. And if you'd be so kind, let me know in the comments, where are you winding down from tonight, and what time is it there? I love watching our little bedtime map light up one dreamer at a time. So now, take a breath, let your shoulders soften, and together, let us step softly into the long journey of the sharks. In the quiet ages before the world knew collapse, before the seas darkened and brightened through the long rhythm of extinction and renewal, Earth carried a very different kind of ocean. These waters belonged to the late Silurian and the Devonian, a span of deep time when the planet was still learning the shapes life could take. The continents rested in unfamiliar arrangements, their edges soft and shallow, and the seas that lapped against them held a warmth that drifted slowly through their depth. Light moved gently through clear water, touching reefs that rose like intricate gardens long before forests ever reached for the sky. In these early oceans, the ancestors of sharks emerged as quiet wanderers. They were small compared to what the imagination often conjures when thinking of sharks today. Their bodies were lean and quick, built less for overwhelming power and more for delicate precision. They slid between patches of seafloor and swaying thickets of ancient algae, weaving paths through worlds that seemed to float in place. Their skeletons were made of soft cartilage, which allowed them to bend and shift with subtle grace. Even in these early forms, there was a sense of efficiency, a design that seemed to require almost nothing extra. These first sharks did not rule their oceans. They did not command fear or command space. They lived alongside many other creatures in a world filled with strange forms. Jawless fishes drifted in loose clusters, their bodies smooth and boneless. Heavier plated fishes, covered in armor-like scales, moved with deliberate slowness, as if feeling their way through the water. Trilobites still explored the seafloor, tracing gentle patterns of movement near reefs built by ancient corals and sponges. The ocean's food webs reflected this softness. Energy moved through the water in layered steps, beginning with small drifting organisms that gathered sunlight and nutrients. They floated in great blooms near the surface, shifting with currents and tides. These tiny producers fed small grazers, which in turn fed early predators like the first sharks and other carnivorous fishes. Nothing felt fixed. Every creature existed within a network that rose and fell with the temperature of the water, with the light above it, and with the slow chemistry of the sea. Deep time carried a rhythm of quiet expansion. Reefs grew outward as new corals joined the old. Seafloor forests of tall branching organisms cast shadows that stretched over the sand. The water often felt crowded with life, though not in the way modern oceans seem. This world held possibilities rather than abundance. Every lineage was still young, still discovering the forms it could take, still testing how to survive in a planet that was itself in transition. The early sharks found their place among these shifting patterns. Their teeth were small compared to later species, arranged in delicate lines that allowed them to grasp soft-bodied prey. Their fins were simple and narrow, giving them the ability to twist suddenly when startled or when hunting. They lived close to the seafloor or within the safe edges of reef systems, where shelter was always near. They were not the giants of future oceans, but they were steady, present, and quietly growing more refined with each passing generation. Water conditions during this time moved gently between stability and subtle change. Currents carried warm layers across long distances. Storms left temporary scars on the ocean floor, then washed away the marks in slow healing. The chemistry of the sea shifted with volcanic activity and the slow rise of early land plants, which began altering the balance between carbon and oxygen. Even these small changes affected food webs. Some grazers grew more robust as algae spread. Some predators adapted to new prey that appeared in patches across the seas. The earliest sharks lived within this constant negotiation between creature and environment. From the high shallows to the deeper slopes, life arranged itself into tiers. At the base were the small drifting organisms that caught sunlight. Above them, grazers and filter feeders moved in large gatherings. Higher still were the first agile hunters, including the early sharks that traced the boundary between opportunity and caution. Larger predators existed too, heavy-bodied fishes covered in plates that shimmered in muted light. These giants were slow but powerful, shaping the behavior of all smaller creatures around them. The early sharks learned to survive, not through dominance but through versatility. They did not rely on size or armor. Instead, they moved with subtle intention, conserving energy, watching for movement, adjusting to each shift in current and light. Their world was full of variety, and this variety shaped them in ways that would echo through the millions of years to come. As the Devonian unfolded, the oceans became even more intricate. Reefs flourished across wide stretches of coastline, creating habitats where countless species could rise, compete, and fall. The early sharks navigated these spaces with growing confidence. Some ventured into open water for brief hunts. Others remained near the safety of reefs or coastal shallows. Their presence was quiet but persistent, a thread woven through the changing fabric of marine life. This world, gentle yet restless, was the foundation upon which their long story would stand. Before any extinction reshaped the seas, before turbulence carved away entire lineages, the first sharks learned to live in oceans that rewarded flexibility more than strength. In those early ages, they moved through water that shimmered with possibility, preparing in their own silent way for everything the planet would one day place before them. In the long sweep of the Devonian, The oceans that had once grown rich with life began to shift in ways that were almost too gradual to see. For millions of years, warm currents had carried nutrients across vast distances, feeding reefs and filling the seas with creatures that drifted, grazed, hunted, and rested in delicate balance. Early sharks had woven themselves quietly into this world, moving through gently stirring water that offered both shelter and opportunity. Yet beneath this calm surface, the planet was already preparing a trial that few species would survive. The continents of this time were not still. They gathered slowly toward one another, raising mountains that poured minerals into nearby seas. Rivers carried these new materials in steady pulses, changing the chemistry of the water in subtle ways. At first, these shifts passed unnoticed, absorbed by the natural rhythms of the ocean, but as the millennia continued, the balance wavered. Nutrients accumulated in places where currents no longer carried them away. Algae bloomed in thick, shimmering layers that glowed near the surface, then died and drifted downward in endless dark snow. With each layer that settled, the seafloor grew heavier with decaying matter. Microorganisms worked tirelessly to break it down, consuming oxygen as they did. The deeper waters began to change from lively to still, then from still to stagnant. In many places, the ocean lost its breath. Zones of low oxygen expanded silently across the world, spreading like invisible shadows. These waters could no longer support the bustling communities that had once thrived there. Reefs, once bright and crowded, started to dim. Many of the corals that built them depended on clear, oxygen rich water. As conditions shifted, their growth slowed. Some reefs crumbled gently over time, their vibrant surfaces turning quiet. Armor plated fishes, which had flourished near these reefs, were suddenly pressed into smaller spaces, competing for food that no longer grew in the same abundance. Many of these heavy bodied creatures, reliant on stable habitats, began to disappear from the fossil record. In shallower waters, the story unfolded differently, but with the same quiet weight. Blooms of algae blocked sunlight from reaching the seafloor, leaving plants and near bottom communities struggling for energy. Grazers that relied on these plants grew fewer. Predators that hunted the grazers lost their dependable meals. Entire sections of the food web faltered as connections that once seemed steady dissolved under the pressure of starvation. The deeper parts of the ocean faced their own challenges. As oxygen levels dropped, vast stretches became inhospitable to most life. Only a few hardy species could tolerate such conditions, and even they lived at the edge of their limits. Many fish that had once filled the mid and deep waters died in these dark zones. Their decline brought silence to places that had once echoed with movement. Through all this, early sharks found themselves navigating a world that changed faster than their instincts were built to understand. They had never been dominant in the Devonian seas, yet their modest size and simple design gave them an unexpected advantage. They did not require large territories or complex habitats. They were not tied to reefs or deep communities in the rigid ways that many other species were. Their bodies, light and flexible, allowed them to explore the edges of the collapsing ecosystems, searching for pockets of water that still offered enough oxygen to sustain their movement. Small prey became scarce, but sharks could shift their focus from one food source to another with relative ease. They were opportunistic hunters, able to follow new patterns as old ones fell away. In the shallow waters where oxygen still lingered, they continued to glide through submerged ridges and coastal shallows. In deeper places where currents occasionally swept fresh water through stagnant layers, they found pathways that other animals could not reach in time. As the late Devonian progressed, the extinction events intensified. Pulses of environmental stress struck in waves. Global cooling touched some regions, Then warming returned with volcanic gases that changed the atmosphere. Seas rose and fell. Habitats that took millions of years to form vanished in geological moments. Entire families of armored fishes disappeared. Many reef building organisms left no descendants at all. Trilobites, which had once scuttled across the sea floor with familiar ease, lost the stability of their world and dwindled rapidly. The early sharks did not escape untouched. Many of their species vanished along with the rest, but some endured, and their endurance came quietly. They survived not because they were strongest, but because they were adaptable and unburdened by the heavy constraints that limited other creatures. They occupied a space in the food web that remained open even as so many others collapsed around them. When the most severe pulses of extinction finally eased, the oceans were left altered beyond recognition. The reefs were quieter, the deeper waters were slow to recover, many predators were gone. The world that emerged was emptier, its fabric thinner, and its rhythms changed. Yet in this newly quiet sea, the faint presence of sharks remained. They slipped through the softened currents, carrying forward a lineage that had weathered its first great trial. In the aftermath, the oceans rested for a time, gathering their breath as life adjusted to the spaces left behind. The early sharks moved through these waters with the same silent persistence that had carried them through the collapse, their bodies tracing paths across a world, learning how to begin again. In the quieter world that followed the Devonian collapse, the oceans carried a softness that felt almost new. Many of the great armored creatures were gone, and the reefs that once shaped the flow of life had faded into gentler outlines. Water moved through wider spaces, unconfined by the crowded communities that had once risen from the seafloor. In this changed landscape, early sharks began to explore possibilities that had lingered within their lineage since its beginning. Freedom in the oceans was never absolute, yet the absence of former giants created a loosened tapestry where new shapes could emerge. Life often responds to open space with creativity, and the sharks of this time were no different. Their bodies, built from cartilage rather than bone, carried a natural softness that allowed subtle adjustments from one generation to the next. This flexibility was not dramatic, but with time it began to weave new silhouettes into the water. Some sharks remained small and swift, preserving the lightness that had carried their ancestors through difficult eras. Others grew longer and more streamlined, shaping themselves into fast pursuit predators. In the absence of rigid constraints, their forms drifted apart like branches reaching in different directions. One of the earliest and most graceful of these forms was Cladocelice. Fossils show a creature with a smooth outline, a narrow body, and a tail built for steady speed. It moved through open water with a flow that seemed almost uninterrupted, as if the sea accepted its presence without resistance. Its fins were simple, but well balanced, guiding it through long glides and sudden turns. Cladocelice hunted by approaching prey with calm precision. Its teeth were not built for crushing, but for gripping soft-bodied animals that moved in quick pulses through the current. In the changing oceans, where heavy-shelled prey had grown fewer, this strategy fit the times with quiet accuracy. Other sharks followed different paths. Stethocanthus carried a shape that seemed to defy easy explanation. Its back rose into a flat brush-like crest, an ornament that glimmered with tiny denticles arranged in patterns. Some researchers believe it may have been used in display, a signal cast through water where light moved gently across its surface. The crest may have helped the shark stabilize itself in the currents, or perhaps it served multiple purposes at once. Stethocanthus showed that evolution did not always favor simplicity. Sometimes, when the environment allowed, it experimented with structures that appeared strange, but functioned with unexpected grace. These unusual forms were more than curiosities. They revealed that early sharks were not confined to a single blueprint. Their bodies could stretch, compress, and reshape themselves in response to the world around them. Some species developed elongated fins that helped them pivot within intricate reef systems. Others grew wider heads that improved their ability to detect subtle movements in murky water. A few evolved stronger tails suited for chasing fast moving prey in the open sea. Each adjustment opened a new doorway into a slightly different way of living. The oceans themselves encouraged this diversity. Currents shifted across long distances, creating regions where food drifted unevenly. Some waters held clouds of small swimming organisms that rewarded sharp maneuvering. Other regions supported larger prey that demanded speed and endurance. The early sharks touched these varied environments with curiosity, their bodies responding across generations to the different demands. Diversity in shape and size allowed them to explore habitats that were once beyond their reach. In addition to physical changes, their internal structures adapted as well. Lighter skeletons of cartilage freed them from the need for constant support, allowing energy to be used elsewhere. Muscles arranged along their sides worked in smooth waves that carried them forward with minimal effort. Their skin, covered with tiny textured scales, reduced drag and enhanced the sensitivity of their movement. Every part of their anatomy cooperated to create bodies that were not fixed in one ideal form, but capable of shifting toward many. As more shark species emerged, the oceans began to echo with a wider variety of hunting strategies. Some early sharks chased prey through open water, using speed as their main advantage. Others lingered near the seafloor, feeding on small creatures that lived among sediment. A few explored deeper waters where light faded and the water grew cooler. This spread across habitats helped stabilize their lineage in ways that were not immediately visible. If conditions changed in one region, sharks in another could continue their lines without interruption. Diversity became a shield, gently diffusing the risks that had once pressed so heavily on their ancestors. This newfound range of forms also changed how sharks interacted with the rest of marine life. Prey species adapted to avoid them, while competitors shifted their own strategies in response. The early oceans grew more complex as these interactions multiplied. Where once there had been a narrower set of roles, now there were layers of movement and behavior interwoven across the currents. Sharks connected many of these layers, drifting between them with the quiet assurance of creatures well suited to their time. Even with this growing variety, early sharks remained modest in scale compared to the giants that would appear in later eras. Their power rested not in size, but in the subtlety of their design. Evolution touched them gently, adjusting a fin here, a tail there, altering their silhouettes in ways that seemed almost delicate. Yet each change added resilience to their lineage. Flexibility became their quiet strength, helping them follow the shape of the ocean as it shifted from abundance to scarcity and back again. In these warm waters, filled with movement, yet touched by the memory of past collapse, the early sharks continued to refine themselves. Their bodies traced new patterns through the sea, shaped by the possibilities that surrounded them. With each passing generation, they drifted into forms that would carry their descendants through the long and complex journey ahead, moving with the same calm persistence that had always defined their place in the ancient ocean. In the long stretch of time that followed the Devonian turmoil, the planet settled into a calmer rhythm. New shorelines formed as continents shifted into broad swaths of land, their edges dipping gently into warm, shallow seas. These waters spread across much of the world during the Carboniferous period, creating vast coastal plains and inland basins that filled and drained with the slow rise and fall of ancient tides. Light filtered through these shallows in pale gold sheets, touching seagrass meadows, sponge fields, and the growing frameworks of reef systems that stitch the seafloor together. Life answered this stability with abundance. Plants had begun to thrive on land, drawing carbon from the atmosphere and altering the composition of air and water. Their spread cooled the climate, and new rivers carried nutrients into the seas, where countless small organisms drifted and multiplied. The surface often shimmered with tiny droplets of living color. Beneath them, the water was thick with opportunity. In this flourishing ocean, sharks entered a new stage of their story. Earlier eras had shaped them into flexible and adaptable forms, but the Carboniferous gave them space to explore that flexibility more boldly. With so many habitats open and so much prey moving through them, their lineage unfolded into an extraordinary range of shapes and roles. Some sharks became sleek pursuit hunters, moving through the open shallows with steady strokes. Their bodies lengthened and narrowed until they resembled swift shadows slipping across the bright water. Others grew shorter and rounder, built for sudden bursts of motion among coral outcrops and sponge towers. The variety of these forms revealed how deeply sharks were beginning to weave themselves into their surroundings. Fossils from this period show teeth of many styles scattered across ancient sediment. Some are sharp and needle-like, suited for grasping soft prey that darted in quick motions. Others are broad and flat, shaped for cracking the shells of tougher creatures that crawled across the seafloor. These dental differences mirror the widening of roles within the shark lineage. They were no longer confined to a single way of feeding or living. They occupied the water column from top to bottom, hunting, scavenging, and exploring with the quiet precision that had always defined their presence. One of the most remarkable examples from this era is Orthocanthus, a shark with an elongated body that glided like a ribbon through still waters. It lived in freshwater swamps and inland basins where the world above was filled with towering forests and thick air. Orthocanthus moved through these darker waters with a slow and deliberate grace. Its presence shows that sharks were no longer limited to the open sea. They had begun to enter rivers and lakes, following currents into habitats with challenges unlike anything their ancestors had known. Reefs in the Carboniferous period were not built by corals alone. Sponges, algae, and other early reef builders contributed to towering structures that twisted upward in branching forms. Within these vibrant walls were narrow corridors and hidden alcoves where smaller sharks could rest or hunt for shelter, seeking prey. The reefs created a maze of living stone that shaped shark behavior in subtle ways. Some species evolved flattened bodies to move through tight spaces. Others grew longer fins that steadied them as they drifted through narrow passages, sensing movements in the shadows. Exceptional fossil sites from this era offer windows into these ancient worlds. One such place is the famous Cleveland Shale, which preserves delicate skeletons of early sharks in layers so fine that even skin impressions sometimes remain. These fossils capture the quiet complexity of their bodies, the soft lines of fins, and the varied shapes of their tails. Each preserved form reflects the growing diversity of the time, frozen in the stillness of ancient mud. Another remarkable site is the Bear Gulch limestone in what is now Montana. Here, entire communities were sealed within a single sedimentary basin, preserving sharks alongside countless fishes, crustaceans, and soft-bodied organisms that rarely fossilize. Some sharks found in this deposit show unusual features, such as long dorsal spines or narrow snouts shaped with unfamiliar elegance. These details reveal how widely sharks experimented with form during the Carboniferous. The environment offered chances to explore, and evolution responded with creativity. As diversity increased, the influence of sharks spread through the ecosystems they inhabited. Their presence affected the movement of prey species, the behavior of competitors, and even the structure of communities built around reefs and shallow basins. They became not only survivors and wanderers, but central figures in the flow of life beneath the surface. Their growing role as predators helped maintain balance within crowded seas where abundance could easily tip into disorder. The Carboniferous oceans were full of gentle motions. Waves broke over vast tidal flats, and the light shimmered through tangled reefs. Within these shifting patterns, sharks traced their own paths with the quiet confidence of creatures discovering a new place in the world. Their bodies, shaped by millions of years of resilience and adaptation, now carried them into roles that would echo across time. They glided through the shallows among forests of algae and drifting schools of early fishes. Their silhouettes, varied and numerous, moved like faint shadows across sandy beds and rising limestone towers. In this period of calm expansion, the shark lineage settled deeply into the oceans, planting roots not in soil, but in the rhythms of water and current. Their diversity expanded with the same slow grace that had always guided their journey through the ancient seas. By the time the Permian period reached its later chapters, the oceans had taken on a character unlike any they had held before. The world's continents had come together into one vast landmass, and this union shaped the seas in subtle but powerful ways. Deep basins stretched across long distances. Narrow coastlines bordered the immense interior desert of the supercontinent. Water circulated through complex patterns, warming in some places, cooling in others, and carrying with it the stories of countless organisms that drifted or swam through its shifting pathways. In these late Permian oceans, life was abundant yet layered with quiet tension. Coral communities had returned in new forms. Sponges and early reef builders settled along bright coastal shelves. Shoals of small fishes moved in silver ribbons through the water. Ammonoids bobbed in gentle spirals, their coiled shells catching glimmers of passing light. This richness created ecosystems that pulsed with activity, woven together by ancient rhythms that had taken millions of years to mature. Sharks were still present, though no longer alone in their pursuit of mastery. Over time, other predators had risen to challenge them. Among the most notable were the large and powerful fish known as the eugeniodonts, whose strange tooth whorls formed spiraling blades inside their jaws. They moved with slow authority, cutting paths through the midwater where prey was plentiful. Their size alone commanded space, and their hunting style shaped the movements of animals around them. There were also long-bodied predators such as the xenacanthids, which had grown comfortable in freshwater and coastal environments. Their flattened heads and elongated shapes allowed them to navigate weeds and submerged forests where shadows deepened into green. They hunted with a methodical stillness, waiting for the right moment to strike. These lineages pushed against the boundaries of environments that early sharks once roamed with ease, forcing sharks to refine their own roles within the growing competition. Some sharks rose to the challenge by becoming more agile. Others developed stronger tails that allowed for faster bursts of speed. A few diversified into smaller niches, feeding on prey that larger predators ignored. The oceans of the late Permian did not favor a single form or strategy. They rewarded adaptability in ways that echoed the lessons learned during older crises. Even so, the competition created a constant hum beneath the surface, a quiet reminder that survival was never guaranteed. The wider ocean environment also played its part in shaping this intricate web of life. Circulation patterns shifted as the supercontinent altered winds and temperatures across the planet. In some areas, warm water gathered near the surface, while deeper layers grew cool and still. This layering created regions where oxygen remained trapped above, leaving the depths increasingly quiet. Many species avoided these darker zones, gathering near the boundaries where currents still carried breathable water. The deep sea floor became a mosaic of vibrant patches and lifeless expanses. Over long stretches of time, small signs of strain began to show. Reef systems, though still present, were not as stable as they once had been. Some grew more slowly, their builders struggling against changes in water chemistry that drifted through the seas. Plankton communities, which floated at the mercy of temperature and nutrient shifts, experienced fluctuations that rippled upward through the food web. Where tiny organisms faltered, the effects spread gradually, touching grazers, predators, and even the large ammonoids that depended on predictable supplies of food. Shallow waters near the supercontinent's edge told a similar story. Their warmth intensified during certain periods, creating environments that were comfortable for some species but stressful for others. The balance of carbon in the seas shifted many times. During brief warming episodes, oxygen dissolved less readily into the surface water. Fish and invertebrates adjusted as best they could, concentrating in cooler refuges or moving along coastlines in search of gentler conditions. These migrations reshaped local ecosystems, even if the changes appeared subtle in the moment. Geological forces deep beneath the crust also began to stir. Volcanic activity in distant regions released gases that entered the atmosphere little by little. These early emissions were not yet catastrophic, but they nudged the climate in ways that hinted at the instability to come. Each shift was small enough to blend into the context of natural variation, yet their combined influence slowly altered the conditions that ocean life had grown accustomed to. As the Permian world progressed, the competition among marine predators intensified within these evolving environments. Sharks continued to navigate their ancient pathways, weaving between challenges with the quiet persistence that had long sustained their lineage. Their shapes reflected the demands of the time, ranging from slender hunters of the open water to robust species that prowled the seafloor. They shared the seas with rivals that were powerful and diverse, each carving out a place in a world that seemed rich but carried the early tremors of change beneath its surface. The late Permian oceans held a certain beauty in their complexity, a tapestry of movement and light shaped by millions of years of growth. Yet within this tapestry were threads that showed signs of wear. Small imbalances formed in the chemistry of the water. Circulation patterns shifted with unfamiliar rhythms. In some places, life continued without disruption. In others, the quiet stress built slowly, adding weight to ecosystems that had once seemed steady. Through these waters, sharks swam with steady motion, their bodies adapting to the ever-shifting mosaic of their environment. They moved through reefs that were still vibrant, across basins that held both plenty and scarcity, and along coastlines touched by changing temperatures. The ocean was vast, intricate, and full of stories, each one carried by the currents that brushed gently along their fins. The late Permian world, already carrying quiet signs of strain, moved slowly toward a moment that would reshape life in a way no earlier crisis had reached. Deep within the crust of the planet, in a region that would one day become Siberia, molten rock pressed upward with growing force. What began as isolated eruptions expanded into one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history. For hundreds of thousands of years, fountains of lava spilled across the land and into the air, covering plains in dark, cooling stone and releasing vast clouds of gases that drifted into the atmosphere. These eruptions, known through their remnants as the Siberian traps, altered the climate with a persistence that life could not ignore. Carbon dioxide rose to levels never seen before, thickening the atmosphere until heat settled across the planet like a heavy blanket. Temperatures climbed slowly at first, then more sharply as each new wave of volcanic activity added to the burden. Warm seas grew warmer still, and currents that once carried life-sustaining patterns began to falter. In oceans stretched across long distances, the chemistry shifted in ways that touched every creature. As more carbon entered the water, acidity increased. Shell builders, already sensitive to small changes, struggled to form the structures that protected their bodies. Some grew thinner, others failed to develop properly at all. Their decline removed an important piece of the food web, leaving grazing creatures with fewer resources and predators with fewer meals. At the same time, warming waters held less oxygen. In many regions, the deeper layers of the ocean grew quiet and still, unable to sustain the animals that once lived there. These low oxygen zones spread like soft shadows across the seafloor, moving upward into regions that had long supported vibrant communities. Small fish, slow-moving invertebrates, and many bottom-dwelling forms lost the stable habitats that had supported them for millions of years. Without oxygen-rich refuges, they faded from the record one by one. As the food web weakened, predators that relied on abundant prey felt the strain. Ammonoids, which had once spiraled gracefully through midwater, declined sharply. Larger fish that depended on steady supplies of smaller animals began to vanish. In some parts of the ocean, entire groups disappeared in a span of time that felt abrupt compared to the long stretches of Earth's usual rhythm. Sharks, too, were drawn into this cascade of collapse. The diversity that had shaped their lineage during calmer ages narrowed as conditions worsened. Some species, adapted to specific prey or particular habitats, found themselves without the resources they needed. Forms that had thrived in cool, oxygen-rich waters suffered when those waters warmed and stagnated. Sharks with heavier bodies or slower life cycles were among the first to slip away, their fossils ending quietly in layers of sediment shaped by troubled seas. Yet even in this era of profound collapse, a few shark lineages managed to persist. Their survival did not come from strength or size, but from flexibility and quiet endurance. Smaller species that required less food endured longer than their larger relatives. Sharks that could shift between prey types adapted more readily to the scattered opportunities that remained. Some lived in coastal zones where currents continued to bring fresher, oxygenated water. Others occupied midwater regions where conditions were still passable, even as deeper layers became uninhabitable. The extinction unfolded in pulses, each one reshaping the oceans with greater severity. The prolonged warming stressed reefs until they crumbled. Acidification altered the shells and skeletons of countless forms. Anoxic waters rose and sank like dark tides, catching animals as they migrated or searched for new feeding grounds. By the time the most intense waves had passed, more than 90% of marine species were gone. It was a silence unlike any that had come before, a thinning of life so wide that the oceans seemed to lose their memory of earlier abundance. The sharks that disappeared represented entire branches of their ancient tree. Some, with elegant dorsal structures or unusual body plans, left no descendants. Others that had dominated certain freshwater or coastal regions vanished entirely. Their absence created gaps in ecosystems that had taken ages to form. The survivors were modest in form and quiet in presence. Their bodies were simple, unburdened by elaborate adaptations. They moved through the altered seas with a lightness that allowed them to conserve energy when prey was scarce. Their cartilage skeletons, efficient and flexible, supported them through long intervals of sparse hunting. These sharks did not flourish during the extinction, but they endured, carried forward by anatomical traits that softened the blow of each environmental change. As volcanic activity slowly waned and the climate began to steady, the oceans remained nearly unrecognizable. The communities that had filled them were reduced to threads, thin but persistent. Through these waters, the surviving sharks continued their ancient motion, tracing paths across basins that were quieter than ever before. The rhythms of the world had shifted around them, yet their lineage found a way to cross this narrow and difficult passage. In the stillness that followed, life waited, holding its breath through the long and delicate recovery that would shape the next era of Earth's unfolding story. When the great dying of the late Permian finally loosened its hold on Earth, the world that emerged felt quiet in a way the oceans had never known. The early Triassic carried the memory of loss in every coastline and basin. Once vibrant waters now stretched in long, pale sheets where life clung on in scattered fragments. Currents that had once carried nourishment across great distances moved sluggishly through uneven temperatures. The seas felt raw, as if still trembling from the long shadows that had swept over them. The warmth that had grown during the volcanic upheaval did not fade quickly. Much of the ocean remained hot enough to strain the creatures that lived within it. In many regions, the water near the surface felt almost heavy with heat, while the deeps held pockets of low oxygen that had expanded far beyond their usual bounds. These inhospitable layers pressed upward at times, disrupting the narrow zones where surviving organisms gathered. Even the most adaptable species found themselves drifting between discomfort and necessity, trying to find places where the conditions allowed their bodies to function. Along the coasts, shallow seas that once supported diverse communities now lay open and bare. Reefs had collapsed, and their ruins settled into the sand like faded memories. Beds of algae, once rich with activity, returned in small patches that struggled to gain a foothold. Tiny plankton, the foundation of so many food webs, flickered in and out of existence depending on where nutrient-rich water still reached. This faint shimmer of life was the beginning of recovery, though the process moved with the slow patience typical of deep time. The animals that survived the extinction faced a world that no longer resembled the one they had known. Many groups had lost almost all of their members. Ammonoids reappeared in limited numbers, their delicate shells drifting through water that still felt unstable. Bony fishes, reduced to only a few lineages, began to expand cautiously into the new spaces offered by the near-empty ecosystems. Invertebrates colonized the seafloor again, forming small clusters that grew quietly, step by step, generation by generation. Sharks, too, were present, though fewer in form and number than they had been in the Carboniferous and early Permian. Their ancient lineage had been trimmed sharply by the crisis. Many of the elaborate or specialized sharks were gone, leaving behind only the most resilient branches of their evolutionary tree. The species that remained were small and lightly built. They carried simple silhouettes that allowed them to glide with minimal effort, using little energy at a time when food was scarce. These sharks moved through the recovering oceans with a gentle persistence. They drifted along shallow coasts where sunlight warmed the water and plankton rose in faint clouds. Some entered estuaries where fresh and salt water met in soft gradients. Others explored deeper stretches where oxygen levels occasionally climbed just enough to support their steady movement. Their presence was quiet but important, a reminder that even the most fragile ecosystems could regain momentum through the steady work of survivors. The early Triassic seas did not offer abundance. Prey was limited to small fishes, soft-bodied organisms, and the early invertebrates that recolonized the seafloor. Sharks adapted to this scarcity by adjusting their hunting rhythms. They waited longer between meals, conserving energy through slower motions. Their bodies, built from cartilage rather than bone, required less metabolic support than many of their competitors. This gave them a slight advantage in the lean environment that persisted through these early ages. As time passed, subtle changes began to ripple through the oceans. Volcanic activity gradually eased, allowing temperatures to decline in small increments. Cooler waters held more oxygen, and these enriched regions spread outward from coastal zones and deeper currents. Plankton populations grew more stable, providing a foundation for the return of small grazing creatures. These grazers, in turn, supported a new generation of mid-level predators. The rebuilding unfolded slowly, like new brush spreading across a landscape left bare by fire. Sharks followed these changes with care. Some species expanded their ranges as prey became more predictable. Others explored abandoned habitats where competition was still low. Their jaws adapted to new food sources, and their fins adjusted to the changing currents. Although their diversity remained limited during these early Triassic chapters, each surviving lineage contributed to the repair of marine ecosystems. They helped regulate growing prey populations, preventing imbalances that could have slowed recovery even further. Exceptional fossil layers from this time capture the gentleness of the rebound. Small shark teeth appear in sediments that also hold the earliest signs of returning fish communities. Their arrangement suggests scattered individuals rather than dense populations. It paints a picture of animals navigating a world that was still learning how to sustain them. These fossils reveal a patience written in stone, as if the sharks were quietly testing each new environmental shift before committing to it fully. The oceans eventually widened their capacity for life again, not in a dramatic flourish, but in a gradual layering of organisms that found ways to coexist within the improved conditions. Each new pulse of oxygen, each fresh bloom of plankton, and each small step toward stability offered sharks more opportunities to refine their place in the changing world. They were no longer numerous, yet their ancient instinct to endure remained steady, guiding them through waters that carried both the memory of loss and the promise of returning life. In these early chapters of the Triassic, the sharks that survived the Great Extinction traced delicate lines through oceans that were still regaining their breath. Their persistence became part of the slow healing of the planet, carried forward by light bodies, simple needs, and the quiet resilience that had followed them since the earliest ages of Earth's unfolding story. In the early Triassic world, where the oceans were still regaining their rhythm, the creatures that survived did so by leaning into whatever quiet strengths they already carried. For sharks, that strength came not from size or abundance, but from a kind of elegant simplicity that had been part of their lineage since its earliest days. In a time when complexity often faltered under the weight of changing seas, their understated design allowed them to move through hardship with steady, unhurried confidence. One of the most important features of this simplicity lay hidden inside their bodies. Unlike many of the bony fishes that shared the water with them, sharks grew not with dense skeletons, but with frames made almost entirely of cartilage. This material was lighter and more flexible, bending slightly with each movement. In calm seas, it allowed them to glide with fluid grace. In troubled waters, it required far less energy to support and maintain. This difference became crucial during periods when food was scarce and every motion demanded careful conservation. Cartilage also shaped their buoyancy in gentle ways. While bony fishes depended on specialized organs to adjust their depth, sharks balanced themselves through the subtle interplay of body shape, muscle distribution, and oil-rich livers. Each element worked together to create a quiet equilibrium that allowed them to move up or down through the water column with minimal effort. In unstable oceans, where oxygen and temperature shifted in uneven layers, this natural buoyancy became a valuable tool. Sharks could drift into zones where conditions were more favorable without the metabolic cost that burdened many of their competitors. Their bodies, streamlined from snout to tail, carried them through currents with remarkable efficiency. The skin, textured with tiny denticles, arranged like overlapping tiles, reduced drag along the surface. Water slipped past them with ease, parting cleanly as they swam. This hydrodynamic shape did more than offer speed. It allowed sharks to travel long distances without exhausting themselves, a trait that became especially important when prey was scattered thinly across recovering ecosystems. Sharks did not need to outpace the fastest animals around them. They needed only to move with purpose and patience, letting the ocean reveal opportunities over time. This balance between strength and restraint reflected their broader way of living. Their bodies were not weighed down by unnecessary ornamentation. Their muscles were arranged to deliver bursts of motion only when required. Even their sensory systems worked quietly, detecting faint electrical signals and subtle vibrations that guided them toward hidden prey. Feeding strategies among early Triassic sharks also demonstrated this minimalist approach. They did not rely on specialized diets. Instead, many species developed flexible jaws that could handle a range of prey sizes and textures. Their teeth reflected this adaptability. Simple triangular forms allowed them to catch small fishes. Narrower, more pointed teeth were suited for grasping soft-bodied animals. Some lineages even carried teeth arranged in gentle gradients along the jaw, shifting from one shape to another as if preparing for whatever meal the sea might offer. This variety did not arise from extravagance, but from quiet refinement. It allowed sharks to endure when other predators, tied to more rigid hunting strategies, found themselves without food during ecological downturns. In a world recovering from the Permian collapse, where entire food webs had to rebuild from scattered fragments, such flexibility became a vital strength. Even the way sharks swam reflected evolutionary minimalism. Their motion came not from frantic flapping, but from slow, rhythmic waves that traveled down the length of their bodies. Each motion pushed them forward with surprising efficiency, allowing them to search wide areas without burning through precious energy. In moments when speed was needed, their tails delivered quick, powerful thrusts. Yet the core of their movement remained steady and measured, shaped by the need to endure more than to overwhelm. This approach to life made sharks more resilient than many animals in the early Triassic seas. As oxygen levels fluctuated and prey populations rose and fell, sharks adjusted without needing dramatic changes to their physiology. Their minimal demands on the environment allowed them to slip into niches that other predators could not use. They occupied shallow waters where new communities were forming. They ventured into deeper regions when oxygen allowed. They entered coastal zones touched by shifting currents and followed small prey that returned in slow, uneven waves. Over millions of years, this simple yet effective design became one of the most durable in the history of marine life. It allowed sharks to persist through warming and cooling cycles, through periods of scarcity and bloom, and through the long, uncertain recovery that followed the greatest extinction Earth had ever seen. Their bodies carried the memory of earlier ages, shaped by the quiet understanding that survival did not always favor the most complex form. Sometimes the strongest lineage was the one that required the least, moved with the lightest touch, and trusted the slow work of time. In the early Triassic oceans, where the world was learning how to breathe again, sharks continued their ancient journey with calm resolve. Their minimalist anatomy, refined through ages of change, allowed them to find a place in waters still searching for balance. They moved through the shifting light with the ease of creatures built for endurance, their simple forms guiding them across a planet that was slowly gathering itself after a long and difficult passage. In the long recovery after the Permian collapse, The oceans shifted through rhythms that were often unpredictable. Prey appeared in scattered pockets, then vanished again as waters warmed, cooled, or drifted into low oxygen states. In this fragile world, many creatures struggled to meet the basic demands of survival. But the sharks that had endured the great extinction carried a quiet advantage within their own bodies, one that was not easily seen but felt in every slow and measured heartbeat. This advantage lay in the way they used energy. Sharks could adjust their metabolism with subtle precision, slowing the pace of their bodies when food became scarce, then rising into motion again when prey returned. For many animals, hunger created a rapid decline that ended in exhaustion. For sharks, hunger became a state they could inhabit without collapse. Their bodies entered a calm, reduced rhythm that allowed them to drift through lean weeks with far less strain. The ability to lower metabolic demand was woven into the very structure of their physiology. Their muscles, built for long glides rather than constant fluttering, required less oxygen compared to the active swimmers around them. Their organs worked with slow steadiness, maintaining essential functions without unnecessary exertion. Even their livers, swollen with rich oils, served as reserves that kept them afloat and nourished during long intervals without feeding. These quiet adaptations transformed scarcity from a threat into a condition they could endure. In the early Triassic seas, where ecosystems were still delicate and prey was distributed unevenly, this metabolic flexibility allowed sharks to explore without the fear of immediate starvation. They could travel between distant regions, following faint traces of small fish or invertebrates. They could rest in deeper waters when temperatures rose near the surface, conserving energy while waiting for currents to shift. These patient strategies helped them survive in a world that offered little certainty. Part of this resilience came from their opportunistic nature. Sharks did not depend on a single prey type. Their jaws, capable of subtle adjustments, allowed them to feed on whatever the ocean provided. If small schooling fish gathered in shallow waters, they shifted toward swift pursuits. If soft-bodied organisms drifted near the seafloor, they changed their movements to suit the slower hunt. When carrion appeared, carried by currents from distant depths, they would scavenge without hesitation, making use of resources that other predators overlooked. This flexibility became essential when ecosystems faltered. A single shift in water chemistry could reduce one prey species while allowing another to flourish. Sharks adapted quickly to these changes, sliding between feeding strategies with the ease of creatures used to navigating unpredictability. Their bodies did not demand a specific diet, and this adaptability offered them a foothold even in waters still recovering from catastrophe. Modern sharks carry these ancient abilities within them, providing glimpses into the resilience that shaped their ancestors. Some species today have been observed going months without a substantial meal, living off stored energy while drifting through wide stretches of ocean. Large sharks, such as the great white, have been known to travel across entire basins, feeding only occasionally during their long migrations. Smaller species, too, can slow their metabolism to extend the usefulness of even a single meal. These behaviors are not signs of deprivation, but reflections of an evolutionary strategy that values patience over urgency. In captivity, certain sharks have surprised researchers by surviving far longer without food than expected. Their heartbeat slows, their movements become gentle and deliberate. Yet their bodies remain stable, as if they have learned to stretch time itself. These observations mirror the quiet truths of ancient seas, where sharks once floated through long intervals of scarcity with the same composed endurance. Their ability to shift between prey types is equally remarkable. Tiger sharks, for instance, are known today for their varied diet, feeding on fish, birds, crustaceans, and sometimes even unexpected objects carried into the water by storms. This broad approach reflects an instinct that has existed for millions of years. When ecosystems are unstable, the ability to consume a wide range of prey becomes a form of security. The ancient sharks of the Triassic, though smaller and less specialized, would have benefited in similar ways from this adaptable palate. Hydrodynamic efficiency also played a role in conserving energy. Every slow sweep of a shark's tail created forward motion with minimal cost. Their bodies, shaped by countless generations, allowed them to maintain long patrols without depleting their reserves. In chaotic environments, where prey might appear in sudden bursts or vanish for weeks, this efficiency allowed sharks to remain active enough to seize opportunities whenever they arose. The combined effect of slow metabolism, opportunistic feeding, and hydrodynamic design formed a quiet triad of survival. It was not dramatic, it was not the kind of adaptation that demanded attention. Instead, it was steady, subtle, and reliable, offering the sharks a path through times when the ocean seemed to hold its breath. As the Triassic seas continued to rebuild, these strengths allowed the surviving sharks to remain present in ecosystems that were still fragile. They drifted through recovering coral fields, followed emerging fish populations along new coastlines, and settled into habitats that had only recently become stable again. Their patience shaped their journey, each movement calculated not by urgency, but by the calm endurance that had guided their lineage through earlier trials. In a world learning how to heal, the sharks moved with an ancient wisdom, conserving their energy, broadening their habits, and trusting in the slow work of time as the oceans gradually returned to life around them. In the gradually recovering seas of the Triassic, life expanded with caution. Ecosystems were still fragile, shaped by long intervals of scarcity and slow rebuilding. In such a world, every new generation of animals carried a quiet weight. The ocean no longer offered the abundant stability of older ages, so the creatures that lived within it found ways to safeguard their young with care shaped by deep evolutionary memory. Among these strategies, the approach taken by sharks stood apart in its gentle patience. Sharks invested heavily in the next generation, a choice that seemed unusual compared to many fishes around them. Instead of releasing vast clouds of eggs to drift through the currents, they developed offspring slowly within their own bodies. This long gestation preserved each developing pup within a protected space where the shifting conditions of the ocean could not easily reach. Inside the mother, the young shark grew layer by layer, supported not by chance but by steady nourishment. Some shark species formed yolk-rich sacs that fueled the early development of their offspring. Others created internal structures that delivered nutrients directly, allowing the young to grow strong before entering the wider world. These methods varied across species, but all shared a common purpose. They aimed to bring each pup into the world not as a fragile hatchling, but as a capable swimmer, already shaped to navigate the environment awaiting it. When the pups finally emerged, they did so with bodies far more developed than many marine animals of similar age. Their fins were firm, their senses were active and alert, their jaws, lined with small but functional teeth, could already grasp prey and defend against danger. This early competence offered a quiet advantage in oceans where survival depended not on numbers, but on readiness. A single shark pup, born with strength, carried a greater chance of reaching adulthood than hundreds of drifting larvae from other species. This approach also influenced how many young each shark could produce. Instead of releasing thousands of eggs, Most sharks brought forth only a few pups at a time. Some species had two, others had 10 or a dozen. These numbers remained low because each developing young required significant energy and time. The mother's body worked carefully to support them, adjusting its own needs as the pups grew inside. The investment was great, but so was the return. Each pup entered the world with a far higher chance of surviving the early phases of life. In the unstable oceans that followed the Permian extinction, this strategy became especially valuable. Waters still shifted between regions of warmth and cooler pockets. Prey populations rose and fell in unpredictable rhythms. Some habitats recovered quickly, others remained barren for long stretches. In such conditions, producing large numbers of fragile offspring would have left many species vulnerable. But sharks, with their slow and patient method, introduced only a few young into each environment, each one equipped to meet the challenges that awaited. These well-developed pups were capable of independent lives from the moment they entered the water. They did not require parental care. They did not rely on the safety of large groups. Instead, they slipped into the recovering seas with the same quiet confidence carried by their ancestors. Their strong bodies allowed them to hunt early. Their senses helped them navigate the currents and find places where the water still held oxygen and food. In a world balancing between collapse and renewal, such independence allowed shark populations to persist even when conditions varied widely from place to place. The slow pace of reproduction also created a form of stability within shark lineages. Rather than expanding rapidly and risking dramatic crashes when food ran low, shark populations grew with measured steadiness. This rhythm protected them from the boom and bust cycles that afflicted many other marine creatures. Because sharks did not depend on massive reproductive events, they avoided the danger of losing entire generations when environmental conditions turned harsh. Instead, each individual life carried significant weight, forming a chain of continuity that stretched through time. This strategy was not without risks. Sharks that reproduced slowly could not recover quickly if many adults were lost at once. But the ocean rarely removed them in sudden, concentrated pulses outside of major extinction events. Their bodies were built to endure, and their careful reproductive approach supported that resilience. Over millions of years, it allowed shark lineages to remain stable, even as entire ecosystems shifted around them. Modern sharks still carry this ancient pattern within their biology. Some species are known to develop their young for more than a year before giving birth. A few carry their pups for nearly 2 years, nurturing them through long migrations and changing seasons. When the young are born, they emerge into reefs, mangroves, open coasts, or deep ocean shelves with the same independence and readiness that their ancestors once held in the Triassic seas. This long gestation, paired with low offspring numbers, forms a quiet thread of wisdom woven through the survival of sharks. It is a reminder that endurance in the natural world can come not from abundance, but from careful investment in every life brought forward. Through this slow and deliberate process, shark lineages held their place through eras marked by upheaval and recovery. They moved with patience, trusting in the strength of each new generation to continue their ancient journey through the changing oceans. In these unfolding waters of the Triassic, where life was learning again how to expand, the young sharks carried a resilience born not from chance, but from the calm and measured strategy that had guided their lineage from its earliest beginnings. As the Triassic world continued to rebuild itself, the oceans carried layers of light and darkness that shifted in unpredictable rhythms. Sediment washed from bare landscapes into the water, Plankton blooms rose and fell with unstable currents. Storms stirred the shallows into dense clouds of debris. In many places, visibility collapsed to only a faint glow, and the deep layers of the sea remained dim, as if the memory of the Permian darkness still lingered in their depths. Life that depended solely on sight struggled within these hazy waters. But sharks, shaped across earlier eras of uncertainty, possess sensory systems that allowed them to move through shadowed environments with calm assurance. Their bodies held quiet tools that picked up the subtle signals of life, even when the world around them seemed nearly opaque. One of these tools was electroreception, a sense woven deep within their snouts. Small pores along their heads, filled with conductive gel, allowed them to detect the faint electrical fields produced by living muscles. Every heartbeat, every twitch, every slow pulse of movement created signals that radiated through the water. To sharks, these signals formed a hidden map, a soft pattern that guided them even when their eyes found only darkness. In the early Triassic seas, where suspended sediment often clouded the shallows, this sense became essential. Small fishes hid within murky patches, invertebrates nestled under layers of drifting material. But the faint electrical currents they produced could not be concealed. Sharks slipped through the dimness, following these delicate cues with unhurried precision. Even young sharks, newly born and exploring uncertain habitats, carried this ancient gift within them, allowing them to navigate waters still recovering from upheaval. Another sense, just as important, lay in their ability to read vibrations. Along their sides ran the lateral line, a thin sensory organ attuned to shifts in water pressure. A moving fin, a distant tail beat, or even the soft displacement caused by swimming prey, all created patterns that traveled outward like ripples in a still pool. Sharks could feel these ripples from surprisingly far away, painting a picture of the world through motion rather than sight. As volcanic winters occasionally returned in pulses after the Permian event, ash and dust sometimes dimmed the skies. Light reaching the oceans weakened, especially in shallow regions that once depended on sunlight for clarity. Darkened waters challenged many creatures, but sharks continued their steady movements. To them, dimness merely shifted which sensory threads they followed most closely. Their vision, adapted for low light with reflective layers of tissue behind the retina, collected what little illumination remained. Shapes that blurred for other animals appeared clearer to sharks as they moved through faint gradients of gray and green. These sensory systems did more than help sharks hunt. They helped them avoid danger and navigate the shifting boundaries of recovering ecosystems. Low oxygen zones, still scattered through parts of the Triassic oceans, often held fewer signs of life. The reduction of electrical and vibration cues guided sharks gently away from inhospitable regions. In this way, their senses served as early warnings, allowing them to conserve energy rather than wander into waters where survival would be difficult. During volcanic winters, when sunlight faded for extended periods, many regions of the sea became quiet. Primary producers declined in certain areas, and prey species migrated toward pockets of stability. Sharks followed these movements with patient accuracy, using their sensory abilities to trace the faint trails of life that persisted. Their calm, wandering paths became part of the slow rebuilding of the oceans, helping to regulate prey populations even when visibility remained low. Some fossil evidence suggests that Triassic sharks expanded into deeper waters during certain intervals of recovery. These deeper zones remained dim, lit only by the softest glow from above. Yet sharks were suited for such conditions. Their eyes adjusted to the muted light, their electroreception mapped the quiet beats of hidden creatures, and their lateral lines sensed the shifting movements of currents and prey. Few predators could move confidently in these layers, giving sharks an advantage in environments where competition remained sparse. Even today, these ancient sensory adaptations remain central to how sharks understand the world. Modern species glide through night-lit seas, tracking prey that they cannot see but can sense through fields and vibrations. Some hunt in deep ocean canyons where sunlight never reaches, relying entirely on the same systems their ancestors once used in the recovering Triassic world. Others move through turbid river mouths and coastal shallows where seasonal storms disrupt visibility, yet they continue their search with quiet certainty. Their senses are reminders of the resilience forged in earlier eras. When ecosystems collapsed, when volcanic winters cast shadows across the surface, and when sediment filled the seas, sharks persisted by listening to the faint signals that life still emitted. They were not bound to the clarity of the water or the generosity of light. They followed deeper currents of information that cut through darkness and uncertainty, allowing them to navigate worlds that many other creatures feared. In the oceans of the early Triassic, where clarity returned in slow breaths, sharks continued to glide through shifting layers of gloom. Their sensory systems guided them through landscapes still rebuilding, helping them find prey, avoid danger, and remain present in the quiet spaces where life began to grow again. Their movement through these dim waters was not hurried or hesitant. It was calm and assured, shaped by senses that had learned long ago how to read a world touched by shadow. As the Triassic settled into steadier rhythms and the world moved into the long sweep of the Mesozoic, the oceans transformed into vast arenas of possibility. Life, once reduced to scattered remnants, now expanded with boldness. Currents carried warmth through wide basins. Reefs rose again along coastlines. Plankton returned in shimmering blooms that drifted in layers beneath the sunlit surface. In this renewed world, sharks remained present, gliding with the familiar patience that had carried them across earlier eras. Yet, they were no longer the largest hunters in the sea. From the deep blue and the glowing shallows came new giants, shaped by evolution to command the Mesozoic waters. Among the first were the ichthyosaurs. These sleek reptiles, shaped almost like dolphins, soared through the ocean with powerful tails that moved in rhythmic beats. Their bodies were built for speed, and their large eyes allowed them to navigate deeper waters where light faded into twilight. They hunted fish and cephalopods with accuracy, chasing prey that once belonged largely to sharks. Later came the plesiosaurs, creatures with long necks and broad bodies that glided through the water with wide, paddle-like limbs. Some species skimmed near the surface, weaving through patches of small fish. Others ventured into deeper regions, using their flexible necks to snatch prey from hiding. And then, in the later Mesozoic, the mosasaurs rose to prominence. These serpentine giants, powerful and agile, dominated open waters with jaws that could crush bone and swallow large prey whole. In the presence of these reptiles, the oceans took on a new energy. The largest predators no longer resembled the sleek outlines of sharks. They were reptiles, shaped by land-born ancestry, transforming the marine world with their size and strength. Their emergence did not erase sharks from the sea, but it shifted the balance of roles that sharks had long occupied. Instead of competing directly with the giants, sharks began to explore new niches. Their lineage, always flexible, responded to the changing waters with quiet adaptability. While the marine reptiles claimed the open ocean as their high-speed hunting grounds, sharks drifted into spaces where their simpler bodies could still thrive. Some species moved toward the depths, exploring darker layers where fewer predators ventured. Others remained near coastlines, navigating reefs and seagrass beds that offered protection and opportunity. Many sharks became smaller during this era, refining their bodies for precision rather than power. These slender forms slipped through coral corridors and hunted in regions too narrow or complex for the larger reptiles to enter. Their senses, tuned to vibrations and electrical fields, helped them locate prey hidden within the folds of the seafloor. In these places, speed mattered less than awareness, and sharks maintained a foothold through skill rather than size. New environments created new evolutionary paths. Some shark species developed flattened bodies that allowed them to rest along sandy bottoms, waiting for unsuspecting prey to drift near. Others grew elongated snouts that improved their ability to probe crevices in search of small organisms. These early examples of specialization marked an important shift. Sharks were no longer simply surviving after the ancient extinction. They were beginning to diversify again, shaping themselves to the new world rather than attempting to overcome it. Fossils from this time reveal slender forms like those of Hybotus, a shark known for its distinctive fin spines and teeth adapted to varied diets. Hybotus moved comfortably between nearshore environments and open waters, feeding on crustaceans, small fishes, and even shelled animals. Its versatility reflected the broader trend of sharks leaning into generalist roles, avoiding direct conflict with the powerful reptiles that ruled the deeper seas. Other species explored even more unusual shapes. Some developed crushing teeth suited for hard-shelled prey that many reptiles ignored. These sharks patrolled the seafloor, breaking open ammonites or grazing crustaceans with steady, grinding pressure. Their presence helped maintain balance within smaller food webs, preventing certain invertebrate populations from dominating recovering ecosystems. As the Mesozoic progressed, the ocean's landscapes grew increasingly complex. Reefs expanded across warm, shallow regions, forming intricate networks of life. Marine reptiles hunted above them, casting long silhouettes across the water. Within the sheltered spaces of these reefs, sharks adapted once more, becoming nimble and cautious. They remained alert to the passing shadows of larger predators while tending to the smaller prey that flourished among corals and sponges. Sharks also drifted into deeper environments, far below the reach of the marine giants. In these muted layers, pressure increased and light disappeared, but sharks found stability where others could not. Their senses guided them through darkness. Their efficient skeletons allowed them to conserve energy. Their generalist feeding habits let them take advantage of whatever life the deep offered. These lesser-known species contributed to the quiet continuity of the ocean, connecting shallow and deep ecosystems through their movement. Throughout the Mesozoic, sharks continued to refine themselves without attempting to claim the seas through dominance. Their role shifted towards subtler forms of influence. They trimmed prey populations that might have grown too dense. They filled gaps in food webs that would otherwise remain unstable. They endured changes in climate and habitat with the same calm steadiness that had carried them through earlier ages. While the marine reptiles rose and fell across millions of years, sharks persisted in the background, unfolding into new forms and quietly anchoring the ecosystems around them. The oceans shimmered with giants, but beneath those broad shadows swam the enduring lineage of sharks, shaped by adaptability, patience, and the gentle strength of simplicity. In the wide sweep of Earth's history, the size of living creatures has never been fixed. Bodies expand when ecosystems offer abundance, then contract when the world grows harsh. Sharks, shaped by ages of change, follow this quiet rhythm with a sensitivity that helped their lineage endure long after so many others faded. Across the great story of their evolution, one pattern appears again and again. In times of crisis, sharks often grew smaller, their bodies adjusting to the narrowing resources and pressures of collapsing ecosystems. This tendency to shrink was not a sign of weakness. It was a way of stepping lightly when the oceans grew fragile. After each major extinction, food chains broke apart, leaving the survivors in landscapes stripped of their familiar patterns. Prey species were fewer, currents shifted, carrying less nourishment. Regions that once supported large predators transformed into sparse and unpredictable environments. In such worlds, a smaller body became an advantage, allowing sharks to conserve energy, live with limited resources, and move through the recovering seas with minimal demand on their surroundings. The energy needs of a creature are tied closely to its size. Large predators require constant access to reliable prey, often hunting frequently to sustain their muscles and metabolism. When ecosystems falter, this need becomes a heavy burden. Smaller sharks, on the other hand, could glide through these troubled waters with gentle efficiency. Their reduced mass meant they needed fewer meals. Their movements, already economical due to their hydrodynamic design, became even easier to sustain when paired with a lighter frame. In the aftermath of the Permian extinction, when oxygen levels were low and prey scattered unevenly across the seas, sharks that shrank could navigate these challenges more effectively than their larger relatives. A smaller body required less oxygen, an important advantage in oceans still marked by depleted layers. Shrinking also allowed these sharks to slip into habitats where food remained available, such as narrow reef pockets, shallow basins, and coastal shallows that slowly regained life. This pattern repeated itself after other extinction events. Fossil layers across various geological boundaries show clear evidence of size reduction among many shark lineages. In sediments that span these transitions, teeth become noticeably smaller, representing individuals that shrank as conditions deteriorated. Paleontologists often rely on these teeth to trace changes in shark size, since teeth are among the most durable parts of their bodies. In many of these layers, the sudden appearance of smaller teeth marks the moments when the world tightened, pushing sharks toward forms that could endure scarcity. One well-known example appears across the boundary between the Devonian and the Carboniferous periods. Fossil deposits from the time reveal that several shark species grew smaller as the late Devonian crisis unfolded. Their reduced size likely allowed them to survive in waters affected by stagnation and low oxygen, where only the most adaptable species could persist. In the early Triassic, another period defined by environmental instability, shark fossils again reflect a clear trend toward smaller forms. These sharks entered the new era with bodies suited to the uneven terrain of recovering ecosystems. Even in the later Mesozoic, when large marine reptiles ruled the seas, sharks responded to competitive pressure and changes in prey availability by adjusting their size. Smaller sharks found ways to thrive along reefs, in lagoons, and within sheltered environments that the great reptiles rarely visited. Their modest size allowed them to weave between coral branches, hunt smaller prey, and avoid the attention of the giants moving through open waters. These environments became places of refuge, spaces where sharks could maintain their lineage while the world shifted above and around them. Beyond energy savings, size reduction offered other subtle advantages. Smaller sharks matured more quickly, allowing populations to rebuild at a steady pace during times when survival was uncertain. Their births required less space and energy from the mother, a valuable adaptation during eras when resources were scarce. Their smaller frames allowed them to enter habitats inaccessible to larger predators, opening paths into new ecosystems that would later expand as conditions improved. As oceans recovered and prey became abundant again, some shark lineages regained size, growing larger as the environment allowed. But the ability to shrink never left them. It remained a quiet strength, an inherited wisdom that shaped their evolution through each era of change. Even today, sharks living in resource poor environments tend to be smaller than relatives in richer seas, reflecting the same balance between body size and energy demand that guided their ancestors across ancient crises. This connection between environmental stress and body size is also seen in modern observations. In regions where prey has declined or habitats have degraded, some shark populations show gradual reductions in size across generations. Though the causes differ from ancient extinction events, the underlying principle remains the same. When the world tightens, a smaller form offers resilience. In the grand story of shark evolution, size change reflects more than physical adaptation. It captures the sensitivity of these animals to the shifting rhythms of Earth itself. When ecosystems flourish, sharks flourish with them. When the world contracts, sharks contract as well, adjusting their presence so they can continue moving through waters that may offer only faint traces of life. Across millions of years, this quiet flexibility helped their lineage maintain continuity. In times when giants vanished and entire food webs collapsed, the sharks that shrank carried the story forward, gliding through darkness with patience and leaving behind fossil traces that mark each careful step through Earth's long and unpredictable journey. By the time the world entered the long stretch of the Cretaceous, the oceans had become places of remarkable richness. Warm currents washed across wide continental shelves, carrying nutrients that allowed life to bloom in dense and colorful layers. Reefs rose along coastlines like intricate underwater forests, alive with creatures that drifted, darted, and wove themselves into a complex tapestry of relationships. Tiny plankton shimmered in drifting clouds. Schools of fish moved like liquid silver. Shelled animals curled along sandy floors. The seas, once shaken by earlier upheavals, now breathed with steady abundance. Within this flourishing world, sharks found themselves surrounded by opportunity. The long recovery after the Permian and Triassic challenges had refined their lineage, and now the Cretaceous seas invited them to explore new forms and new roles. Evolution unfolded quietly across the millions of years, shaping bodies that reflected the changing landscapes of water and light. Some sharks grew sleek and powerful, built to navigate the open ocean where prey moved swiftly through the blue. Others refined their abilities within reef systems, becoming agile hunters that wove through narrow passages and shadowed crevices. A few wandered into deeper waters, adjusting their senses to the dim twilight that pressed against the ocean floor. The Cretaceous did not give rise to a single dominant shark form. Instead, it encouraged many, each shaped by the habitats that welcomed them. Among the most striking of these predators was Cretaceous, sometimes called the Ginsu shark for the sharp efficiency of its teeth. Cretaceous moved with the confidence of an apex hunter, tracing sweeping paths through the open ocean where large fish and marine reptiles drifted. Its streamlined body allowed it to reach impressive speeds, and its jaws carried rows of cutting teeth, suited for tearing through flesh with clean precision. Fossils of this shark reveal a creature that held an important place in the food webs of the time, commanding respect in seas already filled with powerful competitors. But Cretaceous was only one note in the larger composition of Cretaceous shark diversity. Many smaller species flourished alongside it, each filling a niche, that helped balance the ecosystems around them. Some possessed crushing teeth designed for breaking shells, allowing them to feed on ammonites or crustaceans that were plentiful during this time. Others developed needle-like teeth for grasping swift, slippery fish. A few adapted to sifting small prey from the water, drifting with gentle motions through regions where plankton gathered in sunlit swells. As the oceans stabilized, modern shark lineages began to emerge. The ancestors of today's mackerel sharks, a group that includes great whites and makos, took shape during the Cretaceous. Their bodies grew more aerodynamic, their muscles stronger, and their hunting strategies more refined. The early steps of this lineage can be traced through fossils, showing increasingly efficient tail structures and teeth that evolved toward the familiar triangular shapes seen in later species. Other lineages developed wide, flattened bodies, the early hints of rays and related forms that glided across the seafloor. Their movements resembled slow wing beats as they passed over soft sediment, searching for small organisms buried beneath the sand. These gentle shapes added another layer to the growing complexity of marine life, expanding the range of roles sharks and their relatives could claim. The Cretaceous seas also supported towering marine reptiles like mosasaurs, which dominated the open water with strength and speed. Yet sharks did not disappear under their shadow. Instead, they continued to refine their roles, occupying spaces where their agility, sensory abilities, and patient hunting styles offered advantages. Sharks navigated regions that the larger reptiles rarely entered, such as shallow coastal environments, reef passages, and deeper layers where sensory acuity mattered more than brute force. As reefs grew taller and more intricate, sharks adapted to these vibrant environments. Some species adopted narrow bodies for navigating coral corridors. Others developed elongated snouts to probe the small caverns where prey sought refuge. The bustling reef ecosystems of the Cretaceous provided not only food, but also safety for smaller sharks that could disappear into the labyrinth of living stone whenever danger approached. In fossil deposits across the world, the Cretaceous leaves behind a record of this vibrant expansion. Teeth scattered through marine sediments show a wide range of shapes and sizes, reflecting the many diets and habitats sharks explored. Skeletal impressions, though rare due to their cartilaginous structure, occasionally reveal details of fin placement and body proportions that help scientists trace the gradual emergence of modern forms. These fossils capture moments of quiet stability in a world that, though flourishing, still drifted slowly toward the great turning point at its end. Throughout this era of growth and diversity, sharks did not replace the giants around them, nor did they retreat in their presence. They simply continued to evolve with calm adaptability as they always had. Each new form added resilience to their lineage, creating a variety of strategies that could withstand both abundance and scarcity. The Cretaceous seas were generous, and sharks responded with creativity, finding new ways to move, feed, and live within the shifting landscapes of water and current. As these oceans pulsed with life, the shark lineage deepened its roots even further, preparing unknowingly for the great change that would one day sweep across the planet. For now, they glided through bright waters, each gentle motion a reflection of millions of years of quiet evolution, carried forward by the simple, enduring strength that defined their ancient path. In the final stretch of the Cretaceous, the oceans moved with a confidence earned through millions of years of steady growth. Currents carried warmth across wide basins, reefs shimmered with life, and sharks glided through clear water that held no hint of the sudden darkness to come. Far above the waves, however, a wandering fragment of stone approached Earth with silent inevitability. When it struck, the world shifted in a single violent moment, and the calm seas of the Cretaceous gave way to an age defined by fire, ash, and long shadows. The impact carved a vast crater into the land and sent shock waves racing outward. Forests fell in waves, winds roared across continents. In the sky, dust and vapor rose into towering plumes that glowed with searing heat. Fragments of molten rock fell back to Earth like brief stars, igniting wildfires that swept across continents without pause. These fires brightened the night with orange light, then filled the air with soot that drifted high into the atmosphere. A veil formed across the planet, dimming the sun and altering the balance of life that depended on its warmth. The oceans absorbed these changes with their own muted grief. Ash settled onto the water in a steady rain, spreading across the surface in dark sheets. The chemistry of the seas shifted as gases released by the impact dissolved into the water. Acidity rose in places where delicate organisms had thrived. Tiny shell builders, long accustomed to stable conditions, struggled as their protective structures weakened. Their decline began quietly but grew quickly, reaching upward through the food web. Plankton, the drifting foundation of marine life, suffered greatly in the dimmed light. Many species relied on sunlight to create energy. As the skies darkened and the color of day faded, these organisms dwindled. In regions once filled with shimmering clouds of microscopic life, emptiness spread. Their absence reverberated through the oceans, touching everything that fed upon them and everything that fed upon those creatures in turn. Small fish that grazed on plankton lost their most reliable resource. Predators that depended on these fish found their hunting grounds empty. The ripple moved outward with quiet force, passing through layers of marine life that had grown tightly woven during the Cretaceous. Even the great marine reptiles, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, felt the shift. Many struggled to find enough prey as the food webs beneath them unraveled. Their long, dominant presence in the seas came to an end in these darkened waters. Sharks, shaped by earlier eras of scarcity, responded to the changes with a mixture of vulnerability and resilience. Some shark families, especially those relying on rich pelagic food webs, dwindled as prey collapsed. The large mackerel sharks of the time, those that hunted fast-moving fish in open water, faced harsh challenges when the ocean no longer supported dense schools of prey. A few lineages vanished entirely, their fossils ending abruptly in the layers that mark the transition between the Cretaceous and the Paleogene. But other sharks endured. Their survival came not from strength or size, but from the same quiet adaptability that had carried their lineage through previous global crises. Smaller species, which needed less energy and tolerated a wider range of conditions, weathered the new scarcity more easily. Generalist feeders, able to shift their diet toward whatever remained, found enough resources to persist. Coastal species, living near shallower waters where sunlight eventually returned more quickly, recovered earlier than those in the open ocean. Some bottom-dwelling sharks survived by feeding on invertebrates that endured the shift better than many open-water organisms. Others scraped by during the darkest intervals by conserving energy, slowing their bodies to match the quiet pace of a world that had temporarily lost its spark. Their hydrodynamic design, metabolic flexibility, and ability to detect prey in dim conditions helped them navigate the struggles of these altered seas. Fossil evidence shows that while several shark families disappeared at the end of the Cretaceous, many others crossed the boundary with continuity. The lineages that would one day give rise to modern sharks, including ancestors of ground sharks, carpet sharks, and certain mackerel sharks, endured the long night Their persistence created threads that carried shark evolution forward into the Paleogene, where new oceans would eventually bring new opportunities. As the atmosphere slowly cleared and sunlight returned, the oceans began to breathe again. Plankton reappeared in small patches that grew over time. Prey species expanded cautiously into the recovering waters. Sharks followed these changes with the same patience that had always guided them, moving into spaces where life returned and adjusting their habits as the world regained its rhythm. The seas, after the impact, were quieter, shaped by loss and early renewal, but within them swam the survivors of the ancient shark lineage, carrying with them the subtle strengths that had allowed them to cross yet another threshold in Earth's long and unpredictable story. Through fire in the skies and darkness in the water, they endured, moving forward with calm persistence as the planet began to grow bright once more. In the long silence that followed the end Cretaceous impact, the oceans entered a state they had not known for millions of years. Sunlight, once bright enough to reach deep into the water, weakened behind the thick veil of dust and soot that lingered in the atmosphere. Daylight dimmed to a muted gray. Night stretched deeper than before. Even when the sky began to clear on land, the ocean's recovery lagged behind, its surface still clouded with drifting particles and its deeper layers held in a slow, shadowed calm. This darkness settled unevenly across the seas, but its effect was felt everywhere. Plankton, the drifting organisms that formed the foundation of marine life, depended on sunlight to thrive. With the dimming of the world above, their numbers fell dramatically. Their absence created a quiet emptiness that moved upward through food webs, touching each animal that relied on them either directly or indirectly. In places where clouds of plankton once shimmered, only faint traces remained. The oceans that had been full of life in the Cretaceous now felt strangely hollow. With fewer plankton came fewer small fish, and with fewer small fish came fewer opportunities for predators that depended on fast-moving prey. Many marine creatures, accustomed to feeding in bright, nutrient-rich waters, faced conditions they were not built to endure. The world below the waves felt suspended, waiting for light to return, waiting for the familiar patterns of life to settle back into place. Yet in these subdued oceans, some organisms continued with steady resilience. Sharks, shaped by earlier eras of scarcity and upheaval, navigated the dim water with calm assurance. Their survival did not depend on sight alone. They possessed sensory abilities that allowed them to reach beyond the murky conditions and detect the faint presence of life, even when visibility collapsed. Their electroreception, carried in small pores around the snout, remained effective in complete darkness. Every living creature produced a soft electrical field as its muscles contracted. Even the slightest movement pulsed through the water, and sharks could sense these signals with delicate accuracy. A fish hidden beneath sediment, a crustacean shifting along the seafloor, or a weakened animal drifting in slow circles all produced electrical patterns that guided sharks toward them. Their lateral line, running quietly along each side of the body, sensed vibrations and water pressure changes. In the dim oceans, where visibility offered little guidance, this organ became one of their most reliable tools. It allowed sharks to read the shape of currents, detect the presence of struggling prey, and navigate the unfamiliar conditions of a world still adjusting to catastrophe. Many species that survived the impact were smaller, generalist feeders, capable of shifting between different prey as availability changed. These sharks did not depend on large schools of fish or abundant prey. They followed the faint traces of life wherever it persisted, hunting with patience rather than speed. Their bodies, lightweight and efficient, required fewer resources, allowing them to endure the long stretches between meals when the oceans offered only sparse opportunities. In these darkened waters, bottom feeders played an especially important role. As debris settled from the atmosphere into the seafloor became a repository of organic material. Bacteria and small invertebrates began to work through this layer, feeding in the dim, lightless world that had formed near the sediment. Sharks that could exploit these environments found food where others could not. Their senses guided them along the bottom, detecting hidden organisms or scavenging from the remains of animals weakened by the harsh conditions above. Some generalist sharks moved between habitats with fluid adaptability. They patrolled coastal regions when sunlight slowly began to return, then drifted into deeper waters still held in darkness. Their ability to switch prey types allowed them to track pockets of life that appeared unevenly across the recovering seas. If one region became barren, they sought another. If small fish returned in shallow waters, they took advantage. If the seafloor remained the only reliable source of nourishment, they adjusted their feeding behaviors accordingly. The darkness also offered sharks a temporary refuge from competitors. Many large marine reptiles had vanished after the impact. Other predators struggled to find enough prey to sustain themselves. In this quiet space left behind by extinction, sharks faced fewer threats and could carry their lineage forward with less pressure from the once dominant creatures of the Cretaceous seas. The nutrient-poor conditions did not pass quickly. The return of plankton required time, sunlight, and stability, each of which came slowly after the atmosphere cleared. Yet even as the oceans remained subdued, the surviving sharks continued to glide through them, tracing the faint threads of life that endured in the gloom. Their senses were their guide. Their patience, their strength, and their ability to feed on whatever the changing world offered ensured their place through the long recovery. In these dim waters, where light returned in slow pulses and ecosystems gradually reorganized themselves, sharks remained a steady presence. They navigated the stillness without panic, following vibrations, electrical signals, and their own instinctive understanding of the ocean's shifting patterns. While many creatures faltered in the prolonged darkness, sharks adapted with a quiet grace, allowing them to endure the shadowed years and await the return of brighter seas. When sunlight finally strengthened and plankton began to bloom once more, the ocean stirred with renewed energy. But long before this renewal gained momentum, sharks had already carved their place within the darkness, guided by senses refined over millions of years and shaped by ancient worlds that had once dimmed in similar ways. In the years that followed the great changes at the end of the Cretaceous, the oceans carried a quiet lesson about survival. Life that had flourished in the bright and abundant seas now moved through a world shaped by disruption. In this altered landscape, patterns that once favored speed, power, or extreme specialization no longer offered the same security. Instead, the creatures that adapted best were those that could move with the shifting rhythm of the recovering oceans, changing their habits as conditions demanded. This difference between specialist and generalist forms became one of the most important themes in the long story of deep-time resilience. A specialist is an organism finely crafted for a particular role or environment. In times of stability, specialists can flourish with striking precision. They fit their niche like a key fits a lock. Some Cretaceous marine reptiles, for example, had jaws perfectly shaped for specific prey, such as shelled animals or swift fish. Certain ammonites developed coil patterns suited for particular depths or water conditions. These creatures succeeded wonderfully as long as their world remained constant. But when the oceans changed rapidly, these same strengths became vulnerabilities. A specialist often relies on a narrow range of food, temperature, or habitat conditions. When any one of these shifted, their survival became uncertain. The end Cretaceous impact, which darkened the skies and disrupted marine food webs, struck at the heart of these delicate balances. Many species that once thrived in abundance vanished, unable to adjust their feeding strategies or behaviors quickly enough to match the new reality. There were sharks among these specialists too. Some late Mesozoic sharks had evolved teeth suited for cutting through large, fleshy prey that no longer existed after the collapse. Others relied heavily on prey that depended on strong plankton populations, and when plankton diminished, their food sources fell away. These sharks, although successful in the stable world before the impact, struggled to find a foothold in the dim, nutrient-poor oceans that followed. By contrast, the sharks that survived were those with broader habits. These generalist species did not depend on a single type of prey or a specific kind of habitat. Their teeth were often shaped for versatility, able to grasp, cut, or crush depending on what the moment required. Their movements allowed them to travel between regions, exploring coastlines, shallow seas, and deeper waters in search of nourishment. Generalist sharks carried a quiet flexibility that proved essential when the oceans drifted into long intervals of instability. One example of this contrast can be seen in the fossil record around the Cretaceous boundary. Large specialized predators, once dominant in open waters, leave behind abrupt endings in the layers of sediment. Their teeth vanish suddenly, marking the moment their lineage faded. Yet in those same layers, the teeth of smaller, more adaptable sharks continue without interruption. These sharks were less dramatic in size and behavior, but their ability to feed on varied prey, conserve energy, and occupy different habitats allowed them to slip through the changing world unharmed. This pattern repeats across multiple extinction events in Earth's history. In the earlier Devonian crises, species that relied on specific reef structures or narrow ecological roles suffered heavily when reef systems collapsed and ocean chemistry shifted. But sharks that could hunt in open water, near the seafloor, or along shifting coastlines continued forward with steadiness. Their bodies and behaviors were not tied to a single scenario. They were designed by evolution to adjust rather than dominate. The evolutionary trade-off of generalism is subtle. A generalist species may not outperform a specialist in perfect conditions. It may not be the fastest predator, the strongest hunter, or the most efficient grazer. But when the world changes, as it has many times over hundreds of millions of years, generalists carry an ability that specialists lack. They bend instead of breaking. They shift instead of falling behind. Their survival is not tied to one food chain or environmental pattern. It is spread across many possibilities, giving them strength in eras when stability disappears. For sharks, this approach shaped their lineage in profound ways. Their sensory systems, metabolic flexibility, and diverse feeding strategies all contributed to a style of life that could weather scarcity and upheaval. While some species did become specialized and suffered during extinctions, the core of the shark lineage remained rooted in adaptability. They carried a design that rarely closed doors. Their bodies were simple, efficient, and capable of thriving in environments that fluctuated between warmth and cold, abundance and scarcity, clarity and darkness. This balance between specialization and flexibility is reflected in modern sharks as well. Some species today feed on a wide range of prey, from fish to crustaceans to carrion. Others travel great distances, shifting between regions as conditions change. Even their reproductive strategies, slow and careful, align with a life built to endure rather than expand rapidly. Every aspect of their biology speaks to a lineage shaped not just by success in stable worlds, but by survival in worlds turned upside down. Across deep time, the oceans have rewritten themselves many times. Continents drifted, climates shifted, life surged and receded. Through all of this, sharks remained, not because they were the most specialized hunters, but because they avoided narrowing their path too tightly. Their resilience grew from this openness, from their willingness to move with the world rather than mastering only a fraction of it. In the quiet depths after each catastrophe, when the water held fewer signs of life and the world felt suspended in uncertainty, the adaptable sharks continued forward. They found nourishment in unexpected places, accepted change without breaking, and allowed evolution to guide them gently into the next chapter of Earth's unfolding story. When the long night of the impact years finally began to lift, the oceans entered a new chapter. Light returned in soft gradients, first as a pale wash across the surface, then as a growing glow that reached deeper with each passing millennium. Plankton followed this light, rising in gentle blooms that signaled the rebirth of marine food webs. Small fish, crustaceans, and drifting invertebrates slowly expanded into the quiet spaces left behind by the extinction. The world was not the same as it had been in the Cretaceous, yet it offered room for life to reorganize itself. From this shifting foundation, the modern era of sharks began to take shape. The Cenozoic oceans, stretching through tens of millions of years, became a place of renewal and experimentation. Without the great marine reptiles that once dominated open waters, new opportunities opened across the seas. Sharks, already shaped by survival through deep time, began to diversify once more, exploring the landscapes of these replenishing oceans with a mixture of old instincts and new evolutionary paths. Early in this period, many lineages that had weathered the extinction began to refine themselves. Some remained small, settling into coastal ecosystems where prey was reliable and conditions were stable. Others followed the currents into wider basins, adjusting to the rising abundance of fish that flourished as ocean productivity increased. Their teeth evolved into varied forms, reflecting the growing diversity of prey and habitats. Some became slender and pointed for grasping swift, delicate fish. Others grew broad and serrated, capable of slicing through larger animals. Among the emerging forms were the ancestors of sharks that feel familiar to us today. One branch gave rise to the early relatives of the great white. These sharks honed their bodies for speed, with stiff tails and streamlined silhouettes that allowed them to traverse long distances in open water. Their teeth became triangular and sharply edged, suited for cutting through the flesh of marine mammals that were becoming increasingly common in the Cenozoic seas. Fossils from this lineage show a gradual transition toward the powerful form that would one day patrol coastlines with confident, steady motion. Another lineage embraced a different path entirely. It led to the hammerheads, sharks whose heads broadened into sweeping, wing-like shapes. This unusual form provided sensory advantages, widening the placement of the eyes and enhancing electroreception. With these abilities, hammerheads moved gracefully through shallow waters, navigating reefs and coastlines with extraordinary awareness of the small creatures concealed beneath the sand. Their distinct silhouette became one of the most iconic shapes in the modern ocean. Tiger sharks also began to emerge during this era, carrying a pattern of adaptability that echoed the generalist strategies of their ancient ancestors. Their teeth, curved and serrated, allowed them to feed on a wide variety of prey, from fish and squid to shelled animals and carrion. This broad diet made them resilient in changing environments, and their slow, deliberate movements reflected a lineage accustomed to drifting between habitats as needed. Their presence added another thread to the growing tapestry of shark diversity. As the Cenozoic continued, one lineage took shape that would reach a scale unmatched by any living shark. From ancestors within the mackerel shark group came the rise of Megalodon, a giant whose size and power left a lasting mark on the history of the oceans. Megalodon grew to extraordinary lengths, large enough to hunt early whales and dominate entire regions of open water. Its teeth, thick and sturdy, were suited for grasping massive prey and delivering crushing bites. The return of such a giant did not happen in isolation. It reflected a world where marine mammals flourished, offering food sources capable of supporting a predator of this scale. Warm currents expanded, and the seas became rich with life, creating an environment where Megalodon could grow and roam freely. Despite its immense size, its rise followed the same pattern seen throughout the shark lineage. It emerged not through conquest, but through quietly adapting to the conditions the planet offered. While giants like Megalodon ruled their domains, other sharks continued to expand into varied forms. Some inhabited deep waters, adjusting to cooler temperatures and reduced light. Others became reef specialists, gliding through corals that had regained their complexity. Still others traveled across entire ocean basins, tracing paths that connected distant continents through ancient migratory routes. The Cenozoic seas did not favor a single type of shark. They encouraged a spectrum, each shaped by particular rhythms of environment and prey. And through this gradual unfolding, the modern variety of shark species took root. From small bottom dwellers to swift pelagic hunters, each carried forward the quiet resilience that had defined their lineage since the earliest ages. Even as the oceans changed in temperature and chemistry over millions of years, sharks continued their steady presence. Their bodies, though varied in form, still reflected the simple efficiency that had protected them through past catastrophes. Their senses, refined long ago, remained perfectly suited for navigating both bright shallows and deeper shadowed worlds. And their roles within marine ecosystems grew increasingly diverse, helping maintain balance as life continued to evolve around them. The rise of modern sharks was not a sudden event. It was a gentle unfolding across deep time, a process shaped by survival, opportunity, and the quiet wisdom of adaptability. In these Cenozoic oceans, the legacy of ancient resilience merged with new evolutionary shapes, allowing sharks to claim a renewed place in the changing sea. They carried the memory of earlier worlds within their bodies, yet they moved forward with forms that reflected the possibilities of a new era, drifting through the waters with the same calm patience that had guided their journey from the beginning. In the warm and generous oceans of the early Cenozoic, as marine mammals spread across the seas and fish populations expanded into new shapes and sizes, a lineage of sharks began to grow in ways the world had never seen before. Among these emerging forms, one species rose slowly toward an extraordinary scale. It carried the steady outline of its ancestors, yet its proportions stretched beyond anything that had existed in the shark lineage. Over millions of years, this creature became the great giant we now call Megalodon, a predator whose presence shaped currents of fear and respect throughout the open ocean. Megalodon did not arrive suddenly. Its ancestors, large mackerel sharks adapted for powerful bursts of speed, refined their bodies as the Cenozoic seas filled with whales, dolphins, and other marine mammals. These animals offered rich and nourishing prey, allowing the predators that hunted them to grow even larger. Over time, Megalodon reached lengths that could surpass even the size of many ancient marine reptiles. It moved through warm waters with slow, confident strokes of its tail, guided by senses that had served sharks since deep time. Its teeth grew thick and triangular, suited not only for cutting flesh but for gripping and fracturing bone. Fossilized whale skeletons sometimes bear the marks of these massive teeth, each impression a quiet reminder of the scale at which Megalodon lived. Its jaw could open wide enough to engulf large portions of prey, and its muscles, anchored along a powerful frame, delivered force with remarkable efficiency. Everything about Megalodon's form spoke to abundance and strength, shaped by an era that offered both. But even as Megalodon thrived, the world around it continued to change. Oceans, though vast, are not fixed landscapes. Temperatures shift, currents wander, coastlines rise and sink. Marine mammals evolve and migrate. Megalodon's great size, once a reflection of opportunity, began to carry subtle risks as the conditions that supported giants grew less certain. Large bodies demand steady resources. A creature of Megalodon's scale needed regular access to prey that could sustain its energy needs. When ocean temperatures cooled in later Cenozoic ages and certain marine mammals began to shift into colder or more distant waters, the geography of Megalodon's hunting grounds changed. Prey species diversified and migrated, some moving into regions that were less suitable for a warm water hunter of enormous size. As the patterns of marine life dispersed, the stability that Megalodon depended on began to weaken. Its size, once its greatest advantage, became a limitation. Smaller sharks could adapt more easily to local changes in prey availability. They could shift habitats, switch targets, or move into deeper or cooler waters without being constrained by spectacular metabolic demands. Megalodon, in contrast, required large, calorie-rich prey and broad stretches of warm ocean. Any disruption to these needs created quiet pressure on its lineage. In addition, the cooling of the oceans altered the boundaries of suitable nursery areas. Young Megalodon required protected, warmer coastal waters where they could grow safely before venturing into open seas. As temperatures declined and coastlines shifted, these nurseries became fewer or less stable. Even small reductions in these critical habitats could ripple through the population over thousands of years. The final stages of Megalodon's existence leave a fossil record that becomes gradually thinner, suggesting a slow disappearance rather than a sudden collapse. As ocean ecosystems reorganized and constraints tightened, its numbers dwindled until no more individuals remained to carry the lineage forward. Its fall mirrors the broader lesson written in deep time. Even the most formidable creatures are shaped not only by their strengths, but also by the flexibility of their design. Megalodon's story reveals how specialization can offer astonishing success in stable conditions, yet increase vulnerability when the world shifts. Although Megalodon was not a specialist in the strictest sense, its grand scale placed it close to that boundary. It relied heavily on large prey, expansive, warm waters, and consistent ecological patterns. When the Cenozoic oceans cooled and the distribution of marine mammals changed, the traits that once propelled Megalodon to dominance also limited its ability to adjust. For the shark lineage as a whole, Megalodon's rise and fall highlight a deeper truth. The strength of sharks over hundreds of millions of years has come not from producing giants alone, but from maintaining broad adaptability across countless species. While one lineage grew toward an apex of size and power, others continued to evolve into smaller, more versatile forms. They explored reefs, coastlines, deep basins, and open waters. They fed on fish, crustaceans, carrion, and plankton. Their survival never depended on a single role or habitat, but on many paths unfolding at once. When Megalodon disappeared, these other sharks remained. They carried forward the quiet resilience that had defined their ancestors since the earliest seas. Their endurance reflects a balance that Megalodon, for all its greatness, could not match. Through its rise, we see the possibilities of abundance. Through its fall, we see the importance of adaptability. And so Megalodon's presence in Earth's story becomes both grand and gentle. It reminds us that even the giants of the ocean are part of a larger rhythm shaped by the slow turning of climate and current. Its legacy drifts through the modern oceans not in size, but in the lessons it left behind about how life persists across ages that shift, cool, warm, and begin again. Across the long sweep of Earth's oceans, sharks have never been confined to a single type of world. They have drifted through sunlit shallows, explored the quiet floors of deep basins, patrolled open water where the blue seems endless, and woven through the shadows of reefs that pulse with life. This wide reach, stretching across many habitats, became one of the most important strengths in their survival. While other creatures tied their fates to narrow environments, sharks allowed the sea in its many forms to guide their paths, offering shelter whenever the planet shifted around them. In the warm shallows along ancient coastlines, early sharks found spaces rich with small fish, invertebrates, and sheltering plants. These environments were shaped by sunlight and influenced by tides that pulled water gently in and out each day. Young sharks often thrived here, taking advantage of calmer currents and plentiful prey. The variety of temperatures, depths, and hiding places created a mosaic of opportunities that sharks could explore as they grew. Even when global conditions changed, shallow regions tended to recover quickly because they received light first, allowing ecosystems to rebuild from the bottom upward. Some sharks, however, drifted into deeper waters, far beyond the reach of the sun. In these quiet layers, where darkness stretches in every direction, life moves at a slower pace. Here, sharks learn to follow faint traces of movement, using their senses to navigate the stillness. The deep ocean remained one of the most stable habitats on the planet, barely affected by surface storms, sudden climate shifts, or local disturbances. Species that settled into these depths found refuge during global events that disturbed shallower seas. Their presence in this environment created a buffer in the lineage, a place where sharks could persist even during times of widespread extinction. Reefs, too, offered a different kind of world for sharks to explore. Built by countless small organisms over millions of years, reefs formed elaborate structures filled with tunnels, overhangs, and bright chambers of life. Sharks that lived among reefs became specialists in maneuverability, weaving through narrow passages with careful grace. These environments were vulnerable to change, but they also recovered through cycles of collapse and renewal. Sharks that stayed close to these structures adapted to the constant motion of reef ecosystems, learning to shift between prey types and hiding places as needed. In contrast, the open ocean stretched across the planet in vast, dynamic plains. It was a place defined by movement, where currents delivered nutrients in sweeping arcs and schools of fish migrated in shimmering bands. Sharks that lived here became strong swimmers, capable of crossing long distances in search of prey. They followed seasonal patterns, tracking migrations of marine mammals, fish, and squid. The open ocean changed with climate shifts and continental rearrangements, yet its size and variability meant that sharks could often find suitable regions even when certain areas grew barren. Their ability to travel great distances made them resilient during global changes that affected one part of the sea more than another. This breadth of habitats became a quiet shield against extinction. When one environment suffered, others offered sanctuary. If shallow waters warmed beyond normal limits, deep regions remained cool. If reefs collapsed under sudden shifts in temperature or chemistry, the open ocean continued its slow and steady cycles. If nutrient levels fell in wide basins, coastal zones delivered fresh input from rivers and tidal systems. By spreading their presence across these varied spaces, sharks avoided tying their survival to a single ecological pathway. Species restricted to narrow environments did not have this flexibility. Some ancient marine reptiles depended heavily on specific prey, found only in particular regions of the open ocean. When those prey collapsed, the predators collapsed with them. Certain fish relied strictly on reef structures, and their populations vanished when those reefs declined. Even some sharks that specialized too deeply in one habitat or prey type suffered during major global events. Their stories are recorded in fossil layers, where their presence disappears abruptly, a reminder of how vulnerable narrow ecological paths can become. Meanwhile, generalist sharks, able to move between habitats, persisted. They could shift from coastal hunting to open water drifting. They could dive into deeper layers when surface waters grew too warm or too cool. They could explore new regions as coastlines changed, following opportunities that arose from continental shifts. This movement across the ocean's many faces allowed their lineage to remain steady, weaving through extinction events that fractured the patterns of so many other marine creatures. Over millions of years, this broad distribution also encouraged diversity within the shark lineage. Some species became specialists of reefs, others explorers of the deep, others travelers of open water. But because so many habitats remained available, these branches could coexist without depending entirely on one environment. The lineage as a whole maintained its resilience, even when individual species came and went. The wide reach of sharks across the ocean's varied landscapes created a kind of living continuity. Through ages shaped by rising temperatures, falling sea levels, shifting continents, and the aftermath of global catastrophes, sharks held on to the calm certainty of movement. They drifted from one habitat to another, adjusting with quiet grace. Their story across deep time reflects not the dominance of a single niche, but the gentle strength of embracing many. Through this breadth, the lineage endured, following the slow heartbeat of the ocean through every chapter that unfolded around them. Across the long history of Earth's oceans, sharks have not only survived upheaval and extinction, they have also shaped the very structure of the ecosystems around them. Their presence, patient and enduring, has acted like a stabilizing thread woven quietly through food webs that changed again and again with time. In every era since their earliest beginnings, sharks have influenced the balance of life by guiding how energy flowed from one creature to another, often without leaving more than a trail of scattered teeth to mark their role. As apex predators in many environments, sharks often occupied the highest levels of marine food chains. Their position did not always depend on size or ferocity. Instead, it grew from a simple rhythm of presence. By hunting weak, sick, or slow prey, sharks helped keep populations of fish, marine mammals, and invertebrates healthier and more evenly distributed. This constant shaping prevented single species from becoming too abundant and overwhelming the environments they inhabited. When a particular prey species became too numerous, sharks naturally focused more attention on it, easing pressure on the surrounding ecosystem. This quiet regulation echoed through millions of years. During the Carboniferous, when shallow seas brimmed with life, early sharks trimmed the flourishing populations of fish and invertebrates, ensuring that the delicate balance of reefs and coastal basins remained intact. In the Permian and Triassic eras, Sharks helped guide the recovery of ecosystems after catastrophic events, keeping expanding prey species from upsetting the fragile stability of newly forming food webs. And in the long reach of the Cenozoic, sharks shaped the structure of rapidly growing marine mammal communities, interacting with whales, dolphins, and seals in ways that influenced their movements and behaviors. Yet sharks were not always apex predators. In many habitats, they played the role of mesopredators, occupying the middle rungs of food webs. These sharks balanced between hunting smaller animals and being watched by larger predators, such as mosasaurs, ichthyosaurs, or later, orcas. As mesopredators, they kept smaller prey populations in check, ensuring that lower levels of the ecosystem did not grow unstable. Their movements guided the distribution of fish, schools, and crustacean colonies, affecting how nutrients cycled through the ocean. Even without towering dominance, their presence helped shape the flow of life in countless subtle ways. This dual role, shifting between apex and mesopredator, depending on the era and habitat, contributed to the stability of marine ecosystems in ways that extended far beyond their immediate impact. When sharks thrived, oceans tended to maintain a balance between predators, grazers, and primary producers. When shark populations declined during certain intervals in the fossil record, imbalances followed. Prey species sometimes expanded too quickly, altering seafloor habitats or consuming resources faster than they could replenish. These shifts often echoed through the entire ecosystem, affecting organisms unrelated to the sharks themselves. Over deep time, the stabilizing presence of sharks supported more than ecological equilibrium. It also contributed to the continuity of their own lineage. Ecosystems shaped by balanced interactions created environments where sharks could continue to persist. By regulating prey populations, sharks indirectly protected their own food sources. By preventing overgrazing of algae or overhunting of keystone species, they helped preserve habitats where future generations of sharks would live. This feedback loop unfolded across millions of years. As sharks shaped their environments, those environments provided steady conditions that allowed sharks to remain present. When these conditions faltered during extinction events, the sharks that endured helped guide the rebuilding of life, giving structure to fragile food webs. Each time the world shifted, sharks adapted to the new patterns and helped restore balance in ways that often went unnoticed in the fossil record, yet were essential to the recovery of marine life. Their influence extended across habitats as well. In shallow seas, sharks controlled fish populations that grazed on reef-building organisms, allowing corals and sponges to maintain their intricate structures. In open waters, they guided the movement of large schools of fish, preventing the collapse of midwater ecosystems. In deep oceans, sharks fed on weakened or dying animals, helping recycle nutrients that would otherwise remain trapped on the seafloor. Through these roles, sharks maintained the pulse of oceanic systems, keeping life moving between layers as currents drifted from continent to continent. Even the smallest sharks contributed to this role. Species that fed on crustaceans prevented explosive population growth that could disturb sediment layers. Others that hunted bottom dwellers kept the seafloor from becoming overgrazed, preserving the delicate balance of burrowing organisms and microbial communities. These subtle interactions, repeated over countless generations, anchored the long-term health of marine environments. The continuity of shark populations over deep time reflects how well these roles served them. By supporting ecosystems that remained stable enough to recover after disturbances, sharks created conditions that allowed their lineage to endure without needing to transform radically with each new era. Their adaptability remained important, but it was their influence on the lives around them that helped maintain the broader stability of the oceans themselves. In this way, sharks became more than survivors. They became caretakers of balance, quiet architects of the ocean's sprawling networks of life. Through warm seas and cold ages, through abundance and scarcity, they moved steadily through the water, guiding the shape of ecosystems not by force, but by the gentle persistence of their presence. Across the long story of life in the oceans, sharks carried with them a kind of patience that reached deeper than their movements or their behaviors. It lived within their bodies and within the quiet rhythm of their evolution. While many animals branched into rapid new forms whenever the world shifted, sharks followed a slower path. Their changes unfolded gently across millions of years, almost as if time itself had softened the pace at which their lineage transformed. Evidence of this slow evolution appears when scientists compare shark fossils across vast stretches of geological layers. Teeth recovered from rocks, separated by tens of millions of years, often show familiar shapes, as though the lineage had moved forward by inches rather than leaps. Some groups retained body outlines that looked remarkably similar from one era to the next. Even as continents drifted, climates turned, and other animals reimagined themselves again and again, sharks stayed close to designs that continued to serve them well. This steady rhythm does not imply stagnation. Instead, it reflects a form of genetic resilience, a stability built from structures that require little alteration to remain effective in shifting seas. Sharks developed frameworks early in their history that could endure many forms of environmental pressure without needing to be rebuilt. Over time, they adjusted in small ways, refining senses, reshaping teeth, or changing size, yet the core elements remained. Genetic studies of modern sharks reveal details that help explain this long continuity. Their DNA changes at a slower rate compared to many other vertebrates. Where some lineages accumulate rapid mutations that allow swift adaptation, but also create vulnerability, sharks show a calmer pace. Mutations arise, yet many are repaired or filtered out through cellular processes that maintain genetic integrity. This careful maintenance gives their lineage strength in the face of environmental instability. Some researchers have found that sharks possess robust mechanisms for repairing damaged DNA, systems more efficient than those found in many mammals or fish. These mechanisms help guard against harmful mutations and preserve the functionality of essential genes. Over millions of years, this contributed to the survival of traits that remained well suited to ocean life through periods of both calm and upheaval. The stability of shark body plans further reflects this genetic resilience. Early in their evolutionary history, sharks settled into a form that balanced hydrodynamics, mobility, and sensory precision. A lightweight skeleton of cartilage offered flexibility and required fewer resources to maintain. A tapered body allowed easy movement through water, conserving energy across long distances. Sensing structures along the skin, along with specialized organs inside the head, provided guidance even in low light or murky conditions. Because this design worked in many environments, from shallow reefs to deep open water, sharks did not need to undergo dramatic changes each time the world shifted. While some animals survived by specializing into narrow ecological roles, sharks survived by perfecting a shape that remained useful regardless of habitat. Their slow evolution reflects not limitation, but a form of early success that needed only small adjustments. In periods when the oceans transformed quickly, this stability became a source of protection. During times of warming, cooling, acidification, or reduced oxygen, many species with fragile or highly specialized structures perished. Sharks, anchored by durable genetic patterns and body plans that had weathered earlier storms, often remained. Their slow pace allowed them to persist steadily, while other lineages struggled to adapt. Yet this constancy did not mean uniformity. Within the lineage, variation still unfolded. Different families of sharks developed new tooth shapes that suited prey of particular eras. Some gained broader fins for maneuvering near reefs. Others grew elongated bodies for cruising across wide open waters. But these changes built upon foundations that had already proven effective across millions of years. The adjustments were like gentle turns within a stable course. Genetic continuity also explains why certain ancient traits still appear in modern sharks. Some deep water species carry features that echo forms from the early Paleozoic, subtle reminders of a lineage that never broke from its roots. Even modern great whites, hammerheads, and carpet sharks share core anatomical patterns that trace back through immense stretches of time. Their lineage did not need frequent rebuilding because the early blueprints were already resilient. As scientists study shark genomes more closely, they uncover more hints about this longevity. Sharks possess large genomes with many unique sequences not found in other groups. Some of these sequences appear to play roles in immune function, aging, and tissue repair, offering insight into how sharks endure injuries and environmental stress. These traits may have allowed them to survive periods when the oceans held fewer resources or when ecosystems were too unstable to support species with weaker genetic repair systems. This genetic resilience also shaped how sharks responded after extinction events. When the world emptied and ecosystems broke apart, sharks that survived were able to repopulate new environments without needing drastic evolutionary leaps. Their slow pace gave them enough stability to endure the crisis and enough flexibility to shift gently into whatever roles the recovering seas required. Through all these patterns, a larger picture emerges. Sharks endured not because they evolved rapidly, but because they evolved wisely. Their lineage chose a path of steady refinement and strong maintenance, shaped by mechanisms that guarded their genetic foundations. This calm, enduring rhythm allowed them to survive catastrophes that erased entire branches of the tree of life. In this quiet steadiness, sharks carried their story forward, letting time unfold around them while their lineage continued its ancient journey through the changing seas. Across the deep history of Earth's oceans, sharks drifted through changing worlds while leaving behind only the faintest record of their passing. Their bodies, soft and flexible, were built from cartilage rather than bone. This lightness helped them glide through water with ease, yet it also meant that when they died, little remained to sink into the sediment where time might preserve it. In most cases, their frames dissolved into the sea long before silt or sand could seal them away. What the oceans kept instead were fragments, scattered pieces that whispered of lives once lived but rarely showed the whole form. Because cartilage breaks down quickly, the fossil record of sharks is a puzzle made largely from teeth and dermal denticles. Teeth, hardened with minerals, resisted decay far better than the rest of the skeleton. Over hundreds of millions of years, these teeth fell from jaws again and again as sharks naturally shed and replaced them throughout their lives. Each tooth that drifted into the seafloor became a small anchor for memory. Together, they accumulated into layers that show where sharks lived, how they fed, and how certain species changed through time. Dermal denticles, the tiny structures that cover a shark's skin, also survive in the fossil record. They resemble grains of sand shaped by purpose, each one built for streamlining the flow of water across the body. Their forms vary between species, offering clues about speed, habitat, and the environments that shaped them. Yet denticles are small and easily missed, so their presence often requires delicate work to uncover. Because fossils are so incomplete, scientists must reconstruct the story of shark evolution by assembling these fragments like pieces of a vast mosaic. A single tooth can reveal remarkable details. Broad, flat teeth suggest a diet of shell crushing, telling of ancient seafloors where armored prey flourished. Sharp, narrow teeth hint at fast moving prey in open waters. Serrated edges suggest the ability to slice through thick flesh. Changes in tooth form across different layers of rock show how sharks adapted through ages of plenty and scarcity. Still, there is much that fossils cannot tell. Entire lineages may have passed through the oceans, leaving only a handful of teeth as evidence. Some species known only from scattered fragments might have been abundant, while others that appear common in the record might have been rare. The silence left by missing skeletons makes it difficult to trace full body shapes or understand the precise relationships between many ancient shark families. There are long stretches of time where only the most resilient fragments remain to guide our understanding. This scarcity shapes how we perceive their survival. When a mass extinction sweeps across the planet, the fossil record of sharks may appear to show sudden disappearances or abrupt recoveries. Yet some of these patterns may reflect the gaps in preservation rather than the actual fate of the animals. Species might have endured quietly in deep or isolated seas, leaving few fossils behind. Others may have shifted habitats to places where conditions for fossilization were poor. Their lineage could have continued with subtle changes that never entered the geological archive. Even so, the fragments that do survive form a steady thread across extinction boundaries. Teeth appear below the layers that mark catastrophic events, and they appear again just above. The species may differ, yet the presence remains. This continuity reveals a resilience that the fossils only hint at. Sharks moved through environments that shattered many other groups, yet they left enough behind to show they did not vanish fully from the story. Their fossils, though rare, outline a lineage that persisted through scarcity, rebuilding and adapting in ways the record only partly captures. Some exceptional sites provide clearer glimpses. In a few ancient deposits where conditions allowed for rare preservation, scientists have found impressions of entire shark bodies. These fossils reveal fin shapes, tail structures, and subtle features that teeth alone could not describe. They show how early sharks balanced speed and flexibility, how their bodies curved through the water, and how certain designs appeared long before later species refined them. These rare windows help fill gaps between scattered teeth, offering a more complete portrait of forms that guided the lineage through deep time. The puzzle of missing fossils also highlights the mystery surrounding the origins of some modern shark groups. In several cases, there are long intervals where the ancestors of familiar species seem to vanish from the record entirely, only to appear again in later layers with new features. Their stories continue out of sight, shaped by oceans and climates we can only imagine. This invisibility does not mean absence. It simply marks the quiet spaces where cartilage left no trace. As scientists continue studying both fossils and modern genomes, they connect these scattered clues into a story of remarkable endurance. Though the record is incomplete, it still carries the imprint of a lineage that survived events that silenced many others. The gaps remind us of the ocean's vastness, of how much life can pass through without leaving a mark, and of how the most enduring creatures sometimes move through the world with little trace behind them. In the modern oceans, where the surface glitters with shifting light and the depths hold long stretches of quiet water, sharks continue to move with the same steady presence that guided their ancestors through ages of change. Their behavior today carries echoes of choices refined over millions of years. These choices reveal the strategies that help their lineage persist through turmoil, scarcity, and collapse. By watching how sharks live now, we catch glimpses of the ancient wisdom that once carried them through worlds very different from our own. Migration is one of the clearest expressions of this resilience. Many sharks follow long, sweeping routes across oceans, guided by patterns of temperature, prey movement, and currents. These journeys take them through waters that shift with seasons and tides. By never relying on a single place for survival, they reduce the risk of local scarcity. When one region cools or warms, when prey shifts direction, or when coastal zones become disturbed, sharks follow quiet, instinctive paths toward calmer waters. Some species travel enormous distances. Whale sharks drift from nutrient-rich blooms to tropical shallows, tracing cycles of productivity that vary year to year. Great whites cross entire ocean basins, moving between feeding grounds and resting zones separated by thousands of kilometers. Tiger sharks roam wide arcs between coasts, reefs, and open ocean, adjusting their routes as conditions change. These migrations demonstrate a flexibility rooted in ancient habits. Long ago, when oceans rose and fell with tectonic shifts or rapid climate change, sharks that could move freely found refuge where others could not. Even species that remain closer to particular regions show this instinct. Smaller coastal sharks shift their positions with the tides, with rainfall, or with seasonal upwelling. They move between mangrove forests, sandy flats, and deeper channels as prey availability changes. These small journeys echo the same principle. Mobility softens the impact of disruption. Feeding behavior offers another window into shark adaptability. While some species carry traits that allow them to specialize, most remain opportunistic feeders. They take advantage of whatever the environment offers, switching prey when conditions shift. This flexibility minimizes the risk of starvation during times when food webs falter. Bull sharks feed on fish, crustaceans, birds that fall to the water, and even carrion that drifts on currents. Their varied diet allows them to survive in environments that fluctuate between murky rivers and clear coastal seas. Blue sharks adjust their feeding habits depending on the prey within reach, targeting squid in deep water or fish near the surface. Even great whites, often imagined as hunters of large marine mammals, shift to fish and smaller prey when larger animals become scarce. Opportunistic feeding appears across shark species of all sizes. Hammerheads consume stingrays, crustaceans, octopuses, and small fish, depending on what the seafloor offers. Reef sharks feed on animals that hide among coral, yet they also rise into open water when schools of fish pass overhead. In each case, the shark's ability to loosen its expectations and follow whatever the ecosystem provides becomes a quiet strength, especially during times of decline or unpredictability. This flexibility becomes even clearer when observing sharks that thrive in extreme or degraded environments. Some species live in waters with very low oxygen, navigating calm estuaries where few large predators can follow. Others enter freshwater rivers for long stretches of time, adapting to shifts in salinity that would challenge many marine animals. The bull shark is perhaps the most famous of these travelers, moving between mountain-edged rivers and distant coastlines with ease. There are sharks that live in volcanic regions where chemicals rise from vents and thermal shifts distort the water. Others inhabit cold, dim regions near the Arctic, where seasonal darkness covers the sea for months. Greenland sharks, moving slowly through near-freezing waters, carry a lifestyle shaped by patience and endurance. They feed when opportunities arise, sometimes taking meals that drift from the surface layers far above. Their existence in such environments shows how sharks can adapt to worlds that seem far removed from the tropical shallows where their early ancestors once swam. Some species thrive even in areas affected by human impact. Blacktip sharks gather near urban coastlines where rivers carry sediment and nutrients from inland. Nurse sharks rest among shallow reefs damaged by storms or warming. Lemon sharks patrol regions altered by changing tides and shifting shorelines. While modern pressures pose challenges far beyond those of ancient extinctions, the behavior of these sharks reveals a familiar pattern. When environments degrade, sharks adjust with small changes in movement, diet, and habitat preference. These adaptations cannot solve every threat, but they reflect a lineage shaped by millions of years of surviving instability. The lessons carried in modern shark behavior mirror the traits that once guided them through mass extinctions. Movement across vast distances allowed them to escape regions struck by sudden scarcity. Opportunistic feeding supported them when prey populations collapsed or shifted unpredictably. The ability to inhabit extreme or marginal environments gave them sanctuary when much of the ocean became inhospitable. In the soft movement of their bodies and the quiet choices they make, sharks demonstrate the same enduring strategies that helped their ancestors navigate the broken worlds of deep time. They continue to weave through ecosystems with patience, following patterns shaped by long histories of change. Even now, as the oceans transform in new ways, these ancient habits remain part of their survival, echoing the rhythms that carried them through some of the harshest chapters in Earth's story. Far below the sunlit surface, where daylight fades into a quiet blue and then disappears altogether, the deep ocean stretches across the planet like a vast, hidden continent. Pressure rises with every meter downward, squeezing the water into stillness. Temperatures fall until they settle near freezing. Currents drift slowly through these depths, carrying whispers of nutrients from faraway places. It is a world that moves gently, unaffected by storms or seasons. And within this dim and ancient realm, certain sharks found a sanctuary that helped their lineage endure when the rest of the planet shook with change. Deep sea environments have always acted as buffers during extinction events. While the surface waters could warm or cool dramatically, and while shallow seas rose and fell with shifting climates, the deep ocean changed at a slower pace. Its waters did not feel the full force of volcanic winters, sudden temperature spikes, or periods of intense acidification. Catastrophes that transformed life above often softened as they descended, their impact fading long before reaching the ocean floor. Because of this, species able to live in these depths found stability when the rest of the world grew unstable. Sharks that ventured into the deep took advantage of this calm. Ancient lineages moved downward in slow arcs, exploring the edges of trench systems and settling into regions where pressure shaped every movement. In these quiet zones, where sunlight had never touched, sharks discovered prey that lived in darkness. Some fed on crustaceans that wandered the seafloor. Others waited for drifting animals carried down from the surface. A few adapted to hunt fish that glowed faintly with bioluminescence, using sensing organs that detected the faintest pulses of electricity in the water. Near hydrothermal vents, where mineral-rich plumes rose from cracks in the crust, life took unusual forms. Bacteria flourished in the shimmering water. Tube worms and strange invertebrates fed on chemical energy rather than sunlight. Sharks did not rely on the vents directly, yet some species lingered nearby, navigating the edges where life clustered in small, dense pockets. These ecosystems existed independently from the surface world. Even when sunlight was blocked above for long stretches of geological time, deep vent communities continued to thrive, offering sharks a steady source of prey. Cold ocean trenches formed another refuge. These immense chasms, carved over ages by plate movement, remained isolated from the turbulence above. Their temperatures fluctuated very little, and their ecosystems changed slowly. Sharks that lived here, such as the ancestors of modern deep sea species, moved through darkness shaped by patience. Their bodies grew slowly. Their metabolisms settled into low rhythms that required little food. This made them well suited for periods when nutrient flow diminished or when prey availability shifted unpredictably. The stability of the deep ocean stretches across geological time in a way few environments can match. While continents drifted, collided, and split apart, the trenches continued to exist far below. While ice ages advanced and retreated, the deep waters remained cold but steady. During extinction events, when the oceans above suffered massive losses, deep sea communities often persisted with only partial disruptions. This constancy offered a continuous thread of survival for sharks that chose these depths as their home. Many of these deep dwelling lineages are ancient. Modern relatives, such as the frilled shark, carry features that resemble early forms, suggesting an unbroken presence stretching back to times when forests were young and the first amphibians walked the land. The goblin shark, with its elongated snout and soft body, hints at an evolutionary path shaped not by competition, but by quiet adaptation to still water and slow-moving prey. Other deep-sea sharks have slender bodies, wide pectoral fins, or glowing organs that guide them through darkness. Their shapes evolved not for speed or agility, but for energy conservation in a world where food arrives unpredictably. Because deep-sea ecosystems changed gradually, sharks in these regions did not need to reinvent themselves after each global crisis. Their environments sheltered them from rapid swings in temperature or chemistry. Even when mass extinctions reshaped the upper ocean, deep water sharks continued with their steady rhythms. Prey species in the deep often relied on sinking organic matter rather than primary productivity at the surface, allowing food webs to endure even when plankton populations collapsed above. This protection does not mean the deep sea remained untouched by every event. Large-scale shifts in ocean circulation occasionally reach the depths, altering oxygen levels or nutrient flow. Yet the changes unfolded slowly, giving sharks time to adjust. Their flexible diets, slow metabolisms, and wide ranges helped them remain through transitions that would have overwhelmed more delicate species. The survival of deep-sea sharks adds another layer to the story of shark endurance. Their presence shows how life can persist by moving into environments that feel removed from the pace of the world above. While coastal species faced rapid challenges and open ocean species traveled long distances in search of stability, deep-sea sharks rested in the quiet certainty of darkness. They embraced a landscape shaped by pressure and silence, a place that has carried its own calm through eras of fire, ice, and planetary change. In these depths, the lineage found a gentle harbor. Here, ancient patterns continued without interruption. Here, the oceans held their oldest memories, untouched by many of the storms that shaped the shallows. And within this refuge, sharks kept moving, patient as the passing of ages, drifting through waters that preserved a steady rhythm even when the world above fractured. Across all the eras that came before our own, sharks weathered changes that reshaped the face of the planet. They survived volcanic winters, collapsing food webs, and oceans that swung between warmth and ice. They passed through darkness after ancient impacts and moved calmly through waters that held almost no oxygen. Yet, in the quiet span of just a few human generations, they have faced a force unlike anything their lineage encountered in hundreds of millions of years. The pressures that touch them now do not arrive through the slow breathing of Earth. They come through rapid actions that reshape oceans faster than ancient disasters ever could. During the last century, shark populations in many parts of the world have declined sharply. Some species have lost more than half their numbers, others have fallen by 90% or more. These declines do not unfold across geological layers. They unfold within decades, recorded not in stone but in empty stretches of ocean where sharks once swam in steady patterns. The causes vary from place to place, yet all arise from human activity woven into the rhythms of modern seas. Fishing has had the most direct effect. Sharks reproduce slowly, carrying their young for long periods and giving birth to only a few offspring at a time. These strategies once protected their lineages through chaotic eras, but they cannot keep pace with modern extraction. Industrial fishing vessels move across wide regions, catching sharks intentionally or as accidental bycatch. Fins, meat, liver oil, and other parts enter global markets, drawing more pressure into ecosystems already stretched thin. Even species not targeted directly become vulnerable when nets and hooks sweep across areas where sharks feed or migrate. Habitat loss also shapes their decline. Coastal development alters shorelines where young sharks once found refuge. Mangrove forests are cleared, seagrass beds shrink, and coral reefs fade under warming seas. These environments supported shark nurseries for countless generations. Now, in many places, the shelter these habitats once provided has begun to disappear. The slow and steady rhythms that once guided shark life are interrupted by construction, pollution, and noise that travel far through the water. In ancient extinction events, oceans changed through forces that took thousands or millions of years to unfold. Even the most catastrophic shifts, such as the volcanic eruptions that marked the end of the Permian, moved through the world in patterns that life could respond to over time, however difficult. Temperature rose slowly across entire ages. Oxygen levels dropped in gradual waves, food webs unraveled, yet the shifts held a certain rhythm that matched the long pace of evolution. Human pressures, by contrast, arrive in sharp bursts. Warming now accelerates within a single lifetime. Plastic waste gathers in drifting circles that stretch across whole gyres. Chemical runoff from agriculture pours into river mouths and spreads through coastal seas. Ships move across the water in patterns that disrupt migration routes, their engines sending vibrations through depths once shaped only by the sounds of currents and distant storms. These pressures test shark resilience in ways that ancient disasters did not. Sharks could move away from regions struck by volcanic ash or cooling currents. They could dive into deep water during times of extreme surface heat. They could follow prey into new regions when old habitats shifted. But they cannot easily escape a world where fishing lines reach into their feeding grounds, where warming temperatures spread through every layer of the sea, or where habitats change shape faster than their bodies can adapt. Even their senses, refined over millions of years, encounter new forms of interference. Light pollution from coastal cities reaches into waters that were once dark. Noise from ships masks the faint electrical and mechanical signals sharks rely on to navigate. Chemical pollution alters the composition of water, affecting prey behavior and the cues sharks use to locate food. These challenges do not resemble the natural disturbances sharks have survived in the past. They represent a different kind of transformation, one that alters the ocean's character in ways that cannot be predicted by the rhythms of Earth alone. Yet, the resilience that carried sharks through deep time has not vanished. In regions where human impact is limited, populations remain steady. Some species show flexibility, adjusting their ranges as temperatures change or shifting prey as ecosystems reorganize. Protected areas allow certain populations to recover, offering glimpses of what the oceans might hold if given room to breathe. These signs remind us that sharks endure when given the chance, as they have through every chapter of their long story. Still, the challenge remains unlike anything they faced before. Ancient extinction pressures came from natural forces that shaped and reshaped the planet gradually. Human pressures compress these forces into a scale too narrow for slow evolving creatures to navigate. The oceans remain vast, yet the disturbances now reach into nearly every corner. Where deep sea slopes once offered sanctuary during surface chaos, warming currents now move downward, altering temperatures in regions that remained stable for ages. Where sharks once followed migrations along coastlines, urban expansion shifts the shape of those routes. Through these changes, sharks continue to move with the same quiet grace that guided them through the upheavals of the past. Their presence in the modern ocean adds a gentle weight to the story of life on Earth, reminding us that ancient resilience still flows through their bodies. But the speed of change now tests that resilience in new and unprecedented ways, shaping a future that depends not solely on their instincts, but also on the choices of the species that now shares the sea with them. Across the shifting ages of Earth, sharks drifted through the oceans like quiet markers of the planet's condition. Their presence, steady and enduring, reflects the health of the waters that shaped them. In ancient worlds filled with armored fish and sprawling reefs, sharks swam among vibrant ecosystems. In dark times when life thinned and oceans faltered, they remained as faint but persistent traces of resilience. By following their story through deep time, we learn not only how sharks survived, but also how the earth transformed around them. Sharks have often served as indicators of ocean health, their populations rising or falling with the stability of marine ecosystems. In eras when nutrient-rich waters supported diverse food webs, sharks expanded into many forms and sizes. Warm shallows, reef networks, and open basins became stages for their growth. The richness of these environments allowed sharks to refine their senses, explore new hunting strategies, and fill roles from swift surface predators to quiet bottom dwellers. During times when oceans struggled, their presence shifted. Tooth layers thin in rocks that record mass extinctions, suggesting reduced numbers as ecosystems collapsed. Yet even in these fragile intervals, sharks do not vanish entirely. Their lineage bends but does not break. This contrast between abundance and endurance offers a window into how the planet itself functioned. When sharks flourished, it reflected oceans filled with life. When their traces dimmed, it mirrored a world passing through turmoil. Their survival through every global catastrophe adds depth to this story. They swam in seas reshaped by Devonian collapse, when reefs disappeared and oxygen faded from the water. They persisted through the Permian crisis, when volcanic activity and changing chemistry turned much of the ocean hostile. They existed in the shadow of the asteroid that ended the great age of reptiles, moving through darkened waters long after surface life fell silent. Each survival highlights the remarkable continuity that threads through Earth's history. This continuity reveals something about the planet. Earth does not move uniformly between states. It shifts in pulses. Oceans rise and fall. Temperatures swing across long cycles. Continents drift slowly into new shapes. Each transformation rearranges habitats in ways that challenge life. Yet these changes also create new spaces for adaptation. Sharks moved with these pulses, finding calm waters when others disappeared, and exploring emerging ecosystems as the world healed. Their story shows that resilience is not always found in rapid transformation. Sometimes it lies in forms refined early, held steady by environments that allowed slow evolution to function. Sharks did not need to reinvent themselves with each new age. Their bodies, shaped by early success, fit easily within many types of oceans. This compatibility kept their lineage alive as Earth moved through extremes. It also highlights how interconnected the planet's systems are. When oceans lose oxygen, when currents shift, or when temperatures swing, sharks respond. Their populations adjust, their ranges change, and their fossil traces mark the transitions. These shifts reflect broader changes in ocean chemistry, climate, and global circulation. Sharks become living records of processes that would otherwise be visible only in sediment layers or chemical signatures in stone. Long-term continuity teaches us that Earth holds a deep capacity for change. It has passed through volcanic winters, greenhouse intervals, ice ages, and the reshaping of continents. Life has faltered and recovered, sometimes slowly and sometimes with surprising speed. Sharks moved through these cycles not as dominant rulers, but as steady participants. Their persistence reflects the planet's ability to rebuild after collapse and to reorganize life around new patterns. This longevity also reminds us that Earth's transformations unfold across immense spans of time. Extinctions that appear sudden in fossil layers still take thousands of years to ripple through ecosystems. Recoveries unfold across millions. Through all this, sharks maintain their place, adapting when needed and remaining stable when possible. Their survival underscores the patience with which the planet changes and the ways life adjusts to these rhythms. Yet their history also shows that resilience has limits. Sharks survived ancient crises because their environments, even in their worst moments, changed slowly enough for adaptation to occur. Modern pressures, shaped by human activity, test these limits by accelerating change far beyond natural rates. This contrast highlights how the planet's history can teach us about balance. When change moves within the cycles Earth has long maintained, life finds pathways forward. When change accelerates too quickly, even the most resilient lineages can struggle. Through their long journey, sharks reveal that the ocean is not just a body of water, it is a living, breathing system that reflects the planet's health. Their continuity across epochs illustrates the endurance of Earth's deeper rhythms. Their moments of struggle reflect the points where those rhythms faltered, and their presence today, gliding through seas shaped by ancient memory, carries the lessons of a planet that has changed many times, yet still holds space for life to endure. Across the long arc of Earth's oceans, sharks leave a trail that feels both ancient and incomplete. Their story stretches back hundreds of millions of years, yet the record that carries it is fragmented, shaped more by absence than by clarity. Just as the deep sea holds shadows where light never reaches, the history of shark evolution contains vast stretches where their presence is felt but not fully seen. These unanswered mysteries have followed scientists for generations, inviting quiet wonder about the paths sharks took through deep time and the secrets still resting in layers of stone. Much of this mystery begins with the nature of shark bodies. Built from cartilage instead of bone, they rarely fossilized in full. Where other animals left skeletons that captured entire forms, sharks left teeth, denticles, and the occasional preserved outline. These fragments reveal moments, not entire lifetimes. Because of this, large portions of their lineage drift through the fossil record like silhouettes. Their shapes, behaviors, and relationships must be inferred from scattered pieces rather than complete remains. This scarcity creates lineage gaps, intervals where sharks existed but left little trace behind. Some of these gaps span tens of millions of years. A species may appear suddenly in the rock record, fully formed in its recognizable features, yet its ancestors remain hidden in deeper layers. Other groups vanish from the record only to reappear later, with traits that suggest long periods of unseen evolution. These missing chapters make shark history feel like a book with pages torn out, leaving the narrative intact yet softened by silence. One of the greatest puzzles lies in the origins of certain modern groups. Hammerheads, with their wide cephalofoils, appear in the fossil record far later than genetic studies suggest. Their lineage likely extends deep into the past, but the early forms have not been found. The same is true for some carpet sharks and deep-sea families. Their presence today hints at ancient roots, shaped by ecosystems that existed long before modern oceans emerged, yet the stones do not tell where those roots began. Even the ancestry of great whites presents questions. For years, scientists believed they descended directly from giant makos, whose teeth resemble the serrated forms we see today. Later discoveries suggested a more complex picture, with multiple ancient lineages contributing to the shape and behavior of modern great whites. Still, the transition from early Cenozoic sharks to the large predators of today remains blurry. Stitched together with partial fossils and careful comparison rather than a continuous line of evidence. These gaps go beyond individual species. Entire periods of shark evolution feel thin in the fossil record. After major extinction events, sharks often reappeared abruptly, displaying adaptations that must have formed during the recovery, yet few fossils capture the gradual steps that led to these new designs. Their ability to thrive in deep or shifting waters helps explain this absence. Environments with poor preservation, such as deep slopes or open ocean basins, often cradle species that rarely fossilize. As sharks explored these habitats, they left behind fewer remains for future ages to discover. The unanswered questions extend into how sharks survived certain global catastrophes. We know they endured events that erased entire ecosystems, yet the details of their survival strategies remain partly hidden. Some species may have retreated into deep water refuges, while others shifted prey or shrank in size. But the fossil evidence does not show the full picture. Many of these adaptations occurred in environments unlikely to preserve remains. The resilience of sharks is recorded through their persistence in younger layers, not in the steps they took to reach them. Another mystery lies in the speed of shark evolution. While their overall body plan appears stable, genetic studies reveal periods of rapid diversification after major environmental changes. These bursts of innovation are not always mirrored by abundant fossils. Instead, they are hinted at through sudden appearances of new tooth shapes or unexpected features in younger deposits. The details of these evolutionary leaps are left to speculation, shaped by the gaps between surviving remains. Scientists also continue to explore how sharks dispersed across ancient oceans. Continental positions shifted dramatically over time, separating marine basins or bringing them together. Shark fossils appear in regions that once sat far apart, suggesting migrations across vast distances. Yet the routes they took, the barriers they crossed, and the currents that carried them remain topics of ongoing study. The ancient oceans held patterns of circulation very different from those of today, and sharks likely followed paths no longer visible in the modern world. Deep time survival itself poses questions. How did sharks maintain genetic diversity through repeated bottlenecks? How did their sensory systems adapt in periods of prolonged darkness or scarcity? What roles did deep-sea habitats play in preserving ancient lineages that later re-emerged in shallower seas? Each of these questions touches on aspects of shark biology not easily read from fossils. Instead, they emerge from comparisons between living species and the fragmentary evidence left behind. The mysteries that remain do not diminish the story of shark evolution, they enrich it. They leave space for curiosity, for new discoveries, and for the quiet understanding that some parts of Earth's history resist complete reconstruction. In the gaps between the fossils, we glimpse the vastness of the oceans that shaped these creatures and the depth of time through which they moved. Their story continues to unfold, carried in both the fragments we find and the unanswered questions that invite us to look deeper. For hundreds of millions of years, sharks have moved through the oceans with a quiet steadiness that few creatures have ever matched. They watched early reefs rise from the seafloor, drifted through ancient forests of coral, and survived moments when the world seemed to fall apart around them. Their story reaches back to a time before familiar life took root on land, and it continues into the present with the same gentle rhythm that carried their earliest ancestors through waters long vanished. They are, in many ways, the ocean's longest thread. While countless lineages flared brightly and disappeared, sharks endured. Their bodies flowed with a design that needed only small adjustments as the world shifted. Their senses guided them even when oceans dimmed or currents turned unfamiliar. Their resilience allowed them to slip through mass extinctions that erased entire ecosystems, carrying forward a memory of the ancient sea with every new generation. Yet their endurance is not a story of invincibility, it is a story of balance. Sharks survived because the oceans around them, even when wounded, remained capable of rebuilding. Food webs grew back slowly after collapse. Currents found new rhythms. Deep waters offered refuge when the surface world grew too harsh. Through all of this, sharks persisted not by overpowering their environments, but by adapting gently to whatever shape the ocean took. This long journey highlights the fragility woven into Earth's history. Every extinction, no matter how vast, began with small changes that rippled outward. A shift in temperature, a disruption of oxygen, a sudden loss of sunlight. These forces carried entire worlds with them. Life has always moved within these fragile boundaries, rising and falling in response to patterns far greater than any single creature. Sharks remind us of this delicate balance. Their survival through ancient catastrophes reveals the ocean's ability to mend itself over deep time, yet their struggles in the modern world show how quickly that balance can be disturbed. The pressures they face today move faster than the slow rhythms that shaped their evolution. Habitat loss, warming currents, and industrial activity reach into places that once offered sanctuary. Their endurance, once so certain across ages, now depends on choices made within a single human lifetime. To reflect on their story is to reflect on our own place within Earth's long narrative. The oceans that held sharks from the beginning are the same waters that sustain life across the planet today. When we protect these seas, we join a chain of continuity that stretches backward into deep time and forward into futures still unfolding. When we allow them to heal, we honor the resilience that carried sharks through ages of transformation. As you listen to their story, carried softly through the deep past, you might feel the gentle weight of that connection. Sharks are not just ancient predators. They are living witnesses to Earth's most dramatic changes. Their presence today is a testament to the planet's ability to recover, adapt, and continue. And their vulnerability reminds us that even the most enduring creatures depend on the stability of the world around them. If you have felt a sense of calm wonder while drifting through their long history tonight, I invite you to stay connected to this quiet corner of science. There are countless mysteries still waiting in the depths of Earth's past and present, each carrying its own gentle fascination. You are welcome to explore them with me, one story at a time. If you would like to join these journeys through deep time and distant worlds, a simple subscription is a lovely way to stay close. And if you feel comfortable, sharing where you are watching from brings a small glow to this little community as lights appear softly across the world. For now, let the rhythm of the oceans linger with you. Let the ancient calm of the sharks settle into stillness. And may the gentle story of their endurance drift beside you as you rest, connected to a planet that has carried life through darkness, light, and the unbroken passage of ages.